All right, Madam Chair, I'm going to get the slides shared here, and then we are good to resume.
Thank you, Director Brown.
All right, we are set to resume.
Great.
Coming back from executive session.
Yes, thank you for your patience, everyone. Apologies again for the technology issues that we were having. I'm glad we're finally able to get back on track and resume the meeting, this time hopefully knucklehead free. So the executive session has ended, and we'll now resume the open public portion of the meeting. The next item on today's agenda is approving the minutes of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission meeting held on April 22nd and the minutes for the meeting held on May 4th. So the minutes have been shared and reviewed by the members of the commission prior to this meeting. And if there are no questions, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the meeting minutes for both April 22nd and the meeting minutes for May 4th.
So moved, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Del Cid. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the April 12 minutes and the May 4th minutes, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the ayes have it and the motion is carried. Thank you. So we'll now turn to the chair's remarks or the chair's report. So the commission is establishing ad hoc committees to help advance the work of some of the key components of the CRC's work. The ad hoc committees are as follows. The audit committee will be reviewing compliance with legal, regulatory, and ethical requirements, and will comprise of the chair and vice chair. The Public Reporting and Education Committee will coordinate public awareness campaigns and work with staff on the drafting of required public reports. Those committee members shall be Commissioner Nash and Commissioner Barker. And finally, we have the Bylaws Committee, which will work with designated staff and attorneys to draft bylaws for the commission. And those members shall be Vice Chair Delgado and Commissioner Del Cid. Next, I also want to note for everyone's awareness that the commission really has, our commissioners have been taking great strides to meet with individuals from different categories to hear their thoughts and concerns about establishing the cannabis industry and hearing their ideas for how we can move forward with building out a cannabis industry that reflects our values. So thus far, we've met with both local and state elected officials, stakeholder groups, advocacy groups, and those who have been directly impacted by the war on drugs. And these meetings, these conversations that we've had with folks has been truly inspiring and heartening. But it also demonstrates that the shared commitment to making sure that we're setting up a responsible industry here in New Jersey. And the input that you all are sharing with the commission really does help us shape the rules that will be going into place later this year. So we are using these opportunities in the public meetings to solicit ideas from the public about certain key topics that I think will be critical for the public to understand, for really all of New Jerseyans to know and understand as we move forward here. And that includes the topics that we have scheduled for public comment later today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our invited guests and the public about their ideas and their thoughts on some of these key issues. Next, that's all for the chair's remarks. Next, we'll have the executive director's report. So Director Brown, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon once again, everybody. Wanted to talk about a couple things today. Number one, provide an update on enrollment in the medical program. And number two, tee up some of the discussion that's going to happen later on when we get to public comments. So first off, just on a brief snapshot of where we are in enrollment in the medical cannabis. So as of yesterday, we hit 110,000 patients, just shy of 111,000, which represents a total growth of almost 94,000 since the beginning of 2018 and since we really began to embark on this course of reforming the medical program. Caregivers have also increased substantially. We're up over 4,000 caregivers and closing in on 1,300 physicians. For those who've been tracking, that number of physicians has stayed pretty static for a couple months here. We see a growth of a couple here and there, but nonetheless, we'll continue to try to get more physicians, more healthcare practitioners enrolled in this program. So looking forward to what we have to discuss later, which is really, a couple different topics. First and foremost, municipal considerations related to not only medical cannabis, but also, full legalization of personal use cannabis pursuant to the law that was signed earlier this year. And I wanted to just provide a little bit of historical perspective and also talk about what's in the different laws that we're dealing with here. Because while we don't have our regulations yet, and I know a lot of municipalities are anxious to see what are in those, nonetheless, what's in the statute, and I think a little bit of historical perspective on how we've treated working with our municipal partners in the past can be helpful here. And certainly I hope it sets the stage for some helpful comments later on. So in our current rules, we require applicants for permits to have local approval. Whether that's, a letter from a mayor or, actual zoning approval, to start the process, we're pretty inclusive as far as what we allow folks to produce. Additionally, in order to receive a final permit, any alternative treatment center or would-be alternative treatment center has to demonstrate that they're in compliance with all local codes and ordinances, including those related to schools, places of worship, and other factors if they exist. Importantly, as our investigators are working with future permit holders to, or current permit holders to build new facilities, we're making sure that folks have all the relevant construction permits, a certificate of occupancy, zoning approval, all those pieces that are necessary for a business to operate in a municipality. We do have a rule currently on the books that says no ATCs shall be located within a drug-free school zone. However, I'll note that when we last adopted under the Department of Health, the last update to rules, we did note in response to comments that that's an issue with which we'll be completely deferential to municipality on, i.e. If, we're not going to look at, maps of drug-free school zones and things of that nature, we're going to look to the municipality to determine whether or not an ATC is appropriately situated, whether it pertains to schools or, as I mentioned, those other ordinances, if they exist, related to other things. Importantly, the law that was signed by the governor in the summer of 2019, Jay Koenig's law, specifies in the application process that applicants do need to demonstrate local approval. It also puts in place some specifics as to what can constitute that local approval as part of the application process. Importantly, it also allows municipalities to implement a municipal transfer tax of up to 2% of cannabis that's moving from one ATC located in the municipality to another. even located outside the municipality. Essentially, medical cannabis transferred through an ATC in that municipality, a municipality can implement that transfer tax. Looking ahead to the law that, is really the focus of a lot of what we're doing lately, and looking forward to, trying to finalize some regulations on, and that's PL 2021 Chapter 16. That's the personal use cannabis legalization. And I did want to highlight that the law there also carves out some additional roles for municipalities to work with the commission and vice versa. So first off, once we open up licensing and start accepting applications related to personal use cannabis, there's a requirement that the commission will have to share applications with the municipalities in which applicants seek to locate. Once municipalities have looked at applications, we have to set up, and this will be in regulation, some mechanism by which municipalities can submit to the commission their preference for the applications that are pending before the commission. Furthermore, municipalities can enact zoning and other restrictions and requirements for the operation of cannabis establishment. And again, there's that piece, the municipal transfer tax. As our chair mentioned, we've been doing a fair amount of stakeholder engagement here, and I think one of the things that has come up when talking to some groups that represent local municipalities or the municipalities themselves is there might be an anxiety that something that we do would be inserting the commission into what should otherwise be a local zoning process. And while we don't have regulations now, and while we hope to hear from all of you today as to what we should consider when it comes to municipal involvement in our processes and vice versa, I do foresee that we'll continue, as we have been historically, to be deferential to a fair degree to municipalities and to what's going on in a various locality. Now, I'll note a couple areas where where in everything we do, we want to get back to our core values, and that's when it comes to safety and equity. So, wherever an ATC or an alternative treatment center or a future license holder chooses to locate, we're going to make sure that they're a secure operation. We're going to make sure that they're compliant with all rules of the road as it pertains to both medical and personal use cannabis. But I do think when looking at current rule, when looking at the medical statutes and then the personal use cannabis statutes, they do provide a good framework for a good working relationship between the Cannabis Regulatory Commission and municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey. And with that, I would like to, those are really the extent of my comments for today. We do have a couple other issues on the agenda that are critically important to us as well. Interim testing standards, the approval of some satellite locations, but also when we get to the public comment portion, we're also going to be hearing about new cannabis product types and whether or not they would be applicable in medical or personal use cannabis landscapes, as well as how we can continue to protect access to patients as we embark on this endeavor to create regulations for personal use cannabis in the state of New Jersey. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Director Brown. The next item on today's agenda is approving the medical cannabis satellite dispensaries. The proposed satellite dispensaries, they may be displayed on the screen currently. Just checking, Director Brown, do we have those for display? Okay, great, perfect, thank you. And Director Brown, can you please provide us with an overview of the approvals for consideration today?
Yes. So importantly, I'll note this goes back to the statute, the law that was signed in 2019. Chapter 24, 6I-7 provides for a number of statutory requirements for the commission to take into consideration. What comes into play here is this subparagraph D, which notes that no entity may be issued or concurrently hold more than one medical cannabis cultivator permit, one medical cannabis manufacturer permit, or one medical cannabis dispensary permit at one time, and no medical cannabis dispensary shall be authorized to establish a satellite location on or after the effective date of this law, except that an alternative treatment center that was issued a permit prior to the effective date of the law, or that was issued a permit after the effective date, but due to an application submitted prior to the effective date, shall be authorized to maintain up to 2 satellite dispensaries, including any that were approved related to an application submitted prior to or within 18 months after the effective date of the Jay Koenig's law. I'll note, just to unpack that a little bit for participants, what this basically means is that the 12 currently permitted entities, the 12 ATCs that are currently a part of this market, are authorized by law to maintain up to 2 satellite dispensaries. Under the Department of Health, we set up a process by which we collected information that we need to know that these locations would be in compliance with our full suite of regulations. And a number of these were approved under Department of Health. So notably, Zen Leaf opened a location in Lawrenceville, New Jersey over the weekend. That was approved by DOH. And it took them some time to get ready for that final inspection, which was the last piece before being able to issue a permit. Here before us, we have some applications that required some additional information to be submitted first to DOH and then to the commission to reach those 2. To reach a place where they were both fully compliant and complete. And that's why these 3 applications are before the commission today. And I'll just note finally, Zen New Jersey, this will be their 3rd dispensary location. Their first is in Montclair and their second is in Rochelle Park. And then Cureleaf currently operates in Belmar, New Jersey. And this will be their 2nd and 3rd satellite locations, the first in Bordentown and then the second in Edgewater Park. Ascend operates in the northern region of the state and Cureleaf operates in the southern region.
Thank you, Director Brown. These approvals are all under one resolution. However, the commission will be voting on each application for satellite location individually. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution concerning approvals for medical cannabis satellite dispensaries pending the individual votes on each satellite dispensary?
Madam Chair, I move to adopt the resolution concerning the approvals for medical cannabis satellite dispensaries.
Thank you, Commissioner Del Cid. Do I have a second?
I second this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, Director Brown, can you please call the vote?
Yes, first we have the satellite dispensary application from Ascend Wellness located at 461 to 469 West Street in Fort Lee, New Jersey. This application was found to be compliant with NJSA 24-6I-7 and related guidance and complete. Commissioner Barker.
Aye.
Commissioner Del Cid Coso.
Aye.
Vice Chair Delgado.
Aye.
Commissioner Nash.
Aye.
And Madam Chair Wainu.
Yes.
Great, the ayes have it. Next, we have the satellite dispensary application from Cureleaf for Edgewater Park, located at 4237 US 130 in Edgewater Park, New Jersey. This application was found to be compliant with the relevant statutes and related guidance and found to be complete. Commissioner Barker.
Aye.
Commissioner Del Cid Coso.
Aye.
Vice Chair Delgado.
Aye.
Commissioner Nash.
Aye.
And Chair Wainu.
Yes.
And finally, we have the satellite dispensary application from Cureleaf for Bordentown, located at 191 US 130, Bordentown, New Jersey, 08505. This application was found to be compliant with the relevant statutes, related guidance, and found to be complete. Commissioner Barker.
Aye.
Commissioner Del Cid Coso,
Aye.
Vice Chair Delgado,
Aye.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
and Chair Wenu.
Yes.
The resolution passes and all 3 dispensaries are approved for permit issuance pending a satisfactory final site inspection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the resolution concerning the adoption of interim standards for laboratory testing of medical cannabis, which is critical in our efforts to provide a safe and responsible cannabis industry. The CRC solicited public comment on this issue during our April 22nd public meeting. So to those who shared comments during that meeting, we thank you for the recommendations and the feedback that you gave during that session, as you raised some concerns and overall product safety, concerns about overall product safety, and shared your thoughts about practices and testing standards from other states. Director Brown, can you please provide an overview of the standards recommended by your staff and this resolution?
Absolutely. And thank you to the members of the public and stakeholders who provided input on this issue. As Madam Chair mentioned, it was important for us to hear and important for us in crafting these recommendations. I'll note that, again, just to frame this, these are interim standards. These are only going to be in place until such time as the commission establishes the standards required by both statutes, and really sets up a mechanism in the meantime for third-party laboratories to start providing a critical function in this market, which is to provide expanded testing capacity for a whole range of products, the whole range of products that are produced at alternative treatment centers now and at alternative treatment centers in the future, and ultimately, personal use cannabis when we get there. I'll note that this provision is specific to the medical statutes, and given that we only have alternative treatment centers permitted and operating, this is limited to medical cannabis at the moment. But just to provide an overview of what these interim standards are being recommended as. So the resolution before the commission establishes interim standards pursuant to NJSA 24-6I-19, choosing Maryland's third-party laboratory standards located at Title 10, Subtitle 62 of the Maryland Code of Regulations. It also includes the corresponding Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission's technical authority for medical cannabis testing, and includes requirements that laboratories be ISO 17025 accredited, which was something that we heard from a lot of stakeholders should be a requirement. Importantly, I'll note that the resolution, if approved, will be publicly available on the commission's website, and includes an overview of all the provisions in Title 10, Subtitle 62 of the Maryland Code of Regulations, which would come into play here. It additionally will include attached that Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission's technical authority for medical cannabis testing. Importantly, this resolution provides a mechanism for alternative treatment centers to contract with private third-party laboratories for quality assurance, quality control that meets the statutory provisions of Jay Koenig's law, and for those that agree to operate under these interim standards. Also importantly, because we've certainly heard from our alternative treatment centers that as the industry has expanded, some of the testing capacities that we have, have not kept up as much as we had liked. So what this will do is allow for that if an ATC, if an ATC contracts with a third-party laboratory pursuant to this resolution, the commission will waive New Jersey Administrative Code 864-13.4 or parts of it, and that really is the provisions that currently requires our state lab to do all of the testing. This will allow currently operating alternative treatment centers to begin using third-party laboratories in order to get their products tested and then ultimately released for sale to the public, or to patients and caregivers. Contracts pursuant to this resolution would only be approved until such time as the commission establishes its own standards and licensure process for testing laboratories via our regulations. And notably, employees at labs that would be handling cannabis on behalf of ATCs related to this resolution would require an ATC ID card. So that involves getting a criminal background check. But this is all outlined in the resolution. Additionally, in order to use this as in place of the state lab, we want to make sure that alternative treatment centers are both accountable and transparent related to these results, as well as the third-party laboratories. So any certificates of analysis produced related to this need to be provided to the commission. Certificates of analysis also need to be made available either on a website or upon request to patients and caregivers. And then ATCs that participate in this can only market products in accordance with the potency and purity on a certificate of analysis obtained from an ISO 17025 accredited laboratory as approved by the commission. Importantly, we will also continue to collect samples for quality control testing at the state lab. That's also partially to make sure that that ATCs partaking in this opportunity are getting accurate results, but also provide us to start collecting data on the accuracy of third-party laboratories as well. So that is an overview of the third-party, the interim standards. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution concerning the adoption of interim standards for laboratory testing of medical cannabis as recommended by the staff?
Madam Chair, I move to adopt the resolution concerning the adoption of interim standards for laboratory testing of medical cannabis.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Do I have a second?
I second this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Director Brown, can you please call the vote?
Commissioner Barker,
Aye.
Commissioner Del Cid Coso,
Aye.
Vice Chair Delgado,
Yes.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Chairwoman Waynu.
Yes.
The resolution passes.
Next, we have the public comment period. So the commission would like to remind you that you can submit your comments to us during and after this meeting in writing via our website, nj.gov/cannabis/meetings, or by sending an email to mmp questions@doh.nj.gov. Please note that comments submitted to the email address and on our website are shared with the commission members and are made public along with the meeting's minutes. In order to achieve the goals and priorities of the commission, your input is vital. Today, invited speakers, as well as the general public, will have the opportunity to share thoughts and ideas and concerns with members of the commission about the very important topics of zoning and local considerations, concentrates and edible cannabis products, and protecting patient access during the recreational market availability. So, as I mentioned before, the commission has already met with many individuals, including local and state elected officials representing rural, suburban, and urban areas, as well as advocates and stakeholders who shared their thoughts on these issues. So to all of our commenters and guests, your insight really will help us with ideas that are relevant and are helping us shape the commission, helping the commission shape the rules that are due later this year. So today we'll first hear from our invited speakers, followed by those individuals who have signed up in the order they signed up. As indicated on our website, members of the public wishing to speak will be limited to 3 minutes. So please be respectful and concise in your comments. We'll call out the names of the speakers 3 at a time, so you know when your time is coming. When it is your turn to speak, the director or staff will find you and they will ask you to unmute yourself. If you are dialing in via phone, and I believe there is one phone call-in listener, you would press *6 to unmute yourself if you are signed up to speak. Note that in order for our staff to unmute individuals who signed up to speak, your full name or your phone number has to match the name and the phone number you used to sign up to speak. So please ensure that your name matches the name you used to sign up. Otherwise, we will not be able to correctly identify you as a speaker if your name or your phone number does not match what you used to sign up. So Director Brown, with that, can you please call our first invited speakers?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, we have from the League of Municipalities, Mayor Janice Kovach, President, and I see Janice. So I am going to, Janice, you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Just so you know, the chat is disabled. Someone asked me if I was ready. I couldn't respond.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. So good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commission members. As you know, I'm Janice Kovach, President of the New Jersey League of Municipalities and Mayor of the Town of Clinton. I have to thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today to highlight some of the outstanding issues municipalities are facing with the implementation of the cannabis industry. Let me begin with the League has not taken a position on the topic of legalized cannabis. However, prior to the referendum and legislation, we held roundtable discussions with mayors, continued conversations with stakeholders, and we continue to research the implementation and impact that adult recreational use of cannabis has had on municipalities in other states throughout the country. What we learned is that in order for the implementation to succeed, municipalities must be an equal partner at the table. It's important to note that opting out is not necessarily saying no. In some cases, an opt-out is a maybe later. The enabling legislation put a 180-day timeframe for municipalities to take action to ban one or more class of licenses. A municipality's failure to act would mean cannabis cultivation, manufacturing, wholesalers, distributors, and delivery service becomes a permitted use in all industrial zones, and cannabis retail becomes a conditional use in all commercial and retail zones in municipalities for a period of 5 years. At the same time, that legislation gave you, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, the same 180 days to adopt regulations. So as a result, municipalities that are opting out of all licensed establishments may not necessarily be against hosting cannabis establishments within their communities. They are simply delaying a decision until they know all the rules. It's challenging to properly plan without knowing all the parameters. When crafting your regulations, we strongly urge you to ensure that municipalities maintain local control and discretion. New Jersey is a very diverse state, and a one-size-fits-all approach will not work. Local officials need flexibility to address neighbors and community concerns when welcoming a new business into the town. They need to have the ability to make certain that the businesses are welcome into the community so they will succeed. There are also certain areas of concern we have heard echoed from numerous local officials that we would like to bring to your attention. First, we need to ensure that mechanisms are in place that will give municipalities flexibility in administering discipline against license holders when violations occur, including the ability to revoke a license. Much like how progressive discipline exists for liquor license holders, a similar option should be implemented for cannabis license holders. This provides municipalities the flexibility to work with cannabis license holders to ensure that regulations are being followed without relying solely on draconian discipline system. Similarly, municipalities should be given the authority to revoke the license of a cannabis facility which fails to maintain the legally required operational standards. Secondly, municipal governments are on the front line of enforcements, and that fact must be considered when drafting any regulations. The regulations should provide for the opportunity for municipalities to supplement the Cannabis Regulatory Commission regulations on issues such as odor control, security requirements, health and safety protocols, and proximity to community locations such as parks, schools, and houses of worship. The Cannabis Regulatory Commission regulation should be the minimum standards for operation, not the maximum. In addition, any facility, whether it be for retail, cultivation, or is related to any form of legalized cannabis, must be required to comply with all zoning and local ordinances. Local control must remain to address issues such as parking and traffic demands. We want to ensure that any such commercial enterprise should operate on a level playing field with other businesses. Regulations should be crafted to address the gifting of cannabis as part of a transaction to circumvent the licensing and tax obligation. The rule should require that non-promotional and non-business purposes, even a giveaway of the product, will still require a license. And if I may take a moment to just go off script, we would like to urge the commission to continue to prioritize and act as quickly as possible on the 24 medical licenses. It is important to our communities that our medical licenses do not lag while the commission is wrapping its arms around the recreational industry. We look forward to continuing to work with the Cannabis Regulatory Commission as you continue to craft regulations. We ask that while you craft those regulations, that you remember that it will be the local officials who will be working with the new business owners in establishing this new industry. It will be local officials who will be addressing the community concerns with the new industries and the unknowns. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mayor Kovach. It's always great to hear from you and the league on such really important matters. So I'm glad that you were able to participate and join today's conversation. With respect to the 24 medical permits that you mentioned, yes, the commission is working diligently and quickly as it can to finish the scoring for those applications, as we had announced, I believe, at our last public meeting, so that we can get those permits out the door and get those businesses up and running. I do have one follow-up question for you, Mayor, and then I'll open the floor to the other commissioners if they have any questions they'd like to raise. With respect to the discretion and the local control that municipalities are looking for, what kinds of issues do you expect the municipalities to be able to respond to in ways that the commission may not be able to respond to?
I think one of the major ones obviously is traffic. We know this is a new industry and it will draw individuals to the communities that are host communities. So the ability to understand, traffic concerns, parking requirements, and also standard quality of life issues that impact our communities. I can speak for my town. I'm a small community, a walking school community. So the impact for my community might be different than it would be in a larger or a more rural community. It's understanding we are not as I said, a one size fits all. We are truly unique in 565 different personalities and communities.
Thank you, Mayor. Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Mayor Kovach? All right, hearing none. Mayor Kovach, thank you again for your time and your comments this afternoon. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Director Brown, please call the next speakers, please.
Yep. So next will be representing minorities for medical marijuana, Tyrone Bryant, followed by representing the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, Ken Wolski, followed by from the American Planning Association, Chuck Latini. So first I'm going to go to Tyrone Bryant.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
How you doing? Good afternoon, commission members, Chairwoman Wayno and Executive Director Brown. My name is Tyrone Bryant. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak here with you guys today. I'm the CEO and founder of Roll Up Life, Inc. We're a tech-based logistics company here in New Jersey. I'm also the vice president of Minorities for Medical Marijuana here in the New Jersey chapter. I was pleased to hear the mayor speak on her concerns about zoning. When it comes to municipal zoning, we are seeing towns leaning towards opting out if they haven't done so already. We all know this comes from a fear of unknown. And after testifying in several city council meetings, I can tell you one thing: the main concern for municipality leaders is creating and implementing these regulations. Rather than opting out though, I urge cities to consider their demographic, to consider how their local population voted, and to consider their geographical location. We can all agree that some cities just don't need dispensaries, but they may hold the land to accommodate grow facilities, manufacturing operations, which are highly secure, discreet, and very low traffic, which is the main concern for most of these cities. There's also a gap with how small business owners can gain access to these municipal leaders. When it comes to cannabis, if you're not well connected or backed by a top tier lobbying firm, it's just extremely hard to get on the schedule of lawmakers. So this can derail future businesses. And you gotta be as fair to people with capital and connections than the people without it. For small businesses, they not only need this to balance ownership, but we need small businesses to balance our fragile supply chain. And in terms of concentrates and edibles, New Jersey extremely lacks in the edible department. Most, if not all of the dispensary menus, they include lozenges from Curaleaf, and without that, there just isn't any alternatives offered. A variety and competition is not necessarily to only complete the start of this industry, to start off strong. Our goal is to ensure that patients are being offered the best and the secure range of medications for because we all know cannabis is not one size fits all. Strict and preventative rules against what products can be made and consumed are what product can be made and consumed in New Jersey are definitely affecting what's going on in our products. So the more products that we can offer, the better. And markets like California, leading brands like Cookie has a very long concentrate list. Resins, different types of shatter, batter, gummies, chocolates, and drinks complete a very full and robust menu. THC pills are also a very good way to monitor dosing and provide what patients are looking for. Given this diverse palette, it will be ideal for the consumer who wants to medicate in a non-combustible way. These products shall also be available to recreational consumers here in the Garden State. I also believe to combat the issue that we are all having with patients being the main priority, I believe that we should implement some medicinal-only dispensaries to ensure that patients can remain our top priority here in the state. Newer products with higher potency will give patients what they're looking for. Pain increases, and as pain increases, higher dosages may just be needed to counteract that. There's also opiate abusers who have turned to cannabis. Stronger blends can keep them from turning back. With our continued safety education on how to properly consume and with the legal clean products that are starting to come online in the state, this will ensure that our program continues to thrive how it should be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Bryant?
I do.
Quick question. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to expand on his comment about California. And I know that when the bill was being discussed in the legislature, the concern about edibles was, safety, right? How do we not make these products appealing to children? So I think, and I would like to learn more from you and what have you seen in California as to how they're dealing with that situation, or any other state that allows for edibles, but are addressing that concern in a different manner.
Yes, so I just was reading an article about from Marijuana Moment, but a federal report just did this exact thing, and it shows that youth use remains stable after legalization. Even if I feel as though even with the recreational market being as robust as it already is, people know the difference between what is what and what is not. So the cannabis industry should be allowed the same discretion that the tobacco industry is also allowed. So we should be able to trust adults to place these products in places that children shouldn't have access to, but we shouldn't harm our patients from having that full access to the best and more robust products. And we're also hurting our cannabis companies because of how they have to present their products. And if you look at it, the lack of them being able to express themselves and a more, I'm not gonna say flamboyant way, but in a more, popular way to bring more attention to our industry is definitely something that can hurt us in the long run.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barker?
Just had a quick question, Mr. Bryant. And it was in a similar vein to Commissioner Del Coso. You gave the example of California and how their edible market and concentrate market is. Are there other states in your experience that you want to share with the commission that we should look at to see how they operate their edibles concentrates?
Yeah, if you want to look into the older markets such as California, Oregon, and Washington, those would be good. Nevada is a great one, but also go with Massachusetts because Massachusetts is still relatively new. They're rolling with the punches as it's coming along, and they'll give you a good sense of how to gauge it, how states have been gauged it, and how newer states are starting to gauge it. And as you guys are starting to develop your regulations, you'll be able to see what fits for New Jerseyans and what doesn't fit. But just completely limiting products because they may look like something is just very harmful, because think about the different brands of alcohol, right? These products look similar to different things, and children know don't touch that. So I definitely think that the product availability should be opened up more, because are we helping our patients or hindering our patients with this limited availability, especially when they know these products are available and still available on the Black market?
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bryant. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Ken Wolski from the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, followed by Chuck Latini from the American Planning Association, and then followed by Dr. Mikhail Kogan from Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. So Ken, you should be able to speak.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
My name is Ken Wolski. I'm Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey. I'm also a registered nurse. I've been an RN in New Jersey for 45 years. Thank you for this invitation to address the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Edible cannabis products were okayed by the Christie administration for minors. They were subsequently expanded for adults in the Murphy administration. However, they're still not available, as Mr. Bryant pointed out, in the alternative treatment centers in New Jersey. Our organization, CMMNJ, made a patient handbook in 2015 that had recipes that showed patients how to convert the flower into edible products. We also did a 28-minute video demonstrating the process on CMMNJ TV. That's because edibles are very important for patients' health as an alternate method of administration compared to the more common inhalation method. These are for certain people with medical conditions simply cannot inhale cannabis, or they may be in living situations that prohibit that use, or because of their age. Toddlers with seizure conditions, for example, require edibles. Edibles also have the advantage of prolonged duration of effect. They can produce symptom-free patient for 6 to 8 hours, which will guarantee a good night's sleep. And they also produce a steady level of cannabinoid and terpene level in the blood that may be important for the management of certain conditions. Basically, our organization feels that anything patients need should be available to them, including the widest possible array of products. Now, some edibles have gotten a bad reputation, either because inexperienced users tried them, or the users disregarded the warnings on them, or they may have used them in inappropriate situations. But the worst result of that was basically over-sedation or transitory panic reaction. There have been no fatalities, and there never has been a fatality by an overdose of cannabis. The general rule is to start low and go slow in dose titration. But in addition to public health, edibles have the potential to improve public safety. Safety issues are addressed by doing exactly what the CRC is doing now, and that is appropriately regulating the production, the testing, the labeling, the packaging, and the distribution of cannabis products. And regarding labeling, CMMNJ endorses the suggestions of drug Doctors for Cannabis regulations in their labeling regulations. These edible products should also be available to adults. edibles and other high potency products are already in common use among marijuana consumers in New Jersey. To ban them only recreates the very marijuana prohibition that voters soundly repudiated in the November 2020 election. The legal market should have all the products the black market or illegal market currently has. That's the way to ensure the health and safety of cannabis consumers in New Jersey. Ideally, this would include whole plant, full spectrum concentrates, et cetera. And of course, the CRC should ensure that such products are sufficiently available to patients before being made available to the adult use market. And finally, about high dosage, prohibitionists have been exaggerating the dangers of marijuana and denying the medical benefits of cannabis for over 80 years. The latest fears prohibitionists use is that today's marijuana has greatly increased potency that has new risks associated with it. But high potency flower was in common use in the 1960s, along with hashish and keef. It is the sophisticated cultivation techniques that has improved the potency and the variety of homegrown marijuana. And this represents progress and maturity of the US marijuana market. It does not represent the kind of introduction of a new product or a new threat. With legalization and regulation of marijuana, consumers can have products that are organically grown, lab tested, accurately labeled, and with appropriate age and use restrictions. That's how to improve the health and safety of American cannabis consumers.
Recording in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolski. Are there any questions from our commissioners for Mr. Wolski? I have one question. With respect to those high potency items that you mentioned have been in circulation since the 60s, do you think that there should be any quality control measures that maybe apply to high potency products and not for other low potency or lower potency products? Or does the coalition see all products, regardless of the level of THC present, should be held to the same quality control standards?
Yes, we believe that products of any potency should be held to the same quality control standards in terms of production, testing, labeling, packaging, and distribution of the cannabis products. So you could have contamination of a very low potency product that can harm a patient more than a high potency product. So yes, we do believe that the regulations regarding this should be consistent across the board. The only difference, of course, would be warnings associated with it, appropriate warnings, about the strength of the product and the recommended dosages of the product, and the labeling and packaging requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolski, yes, I just wanted to actually, I had a thought, and then the last comment you made really layered my thought. And so I just wanted to touch on it because we did receive public comments from our last meeting touching on the last point you made in terms of the warnings and the labeling. And one individual expressed how they were an advocate for edibles and concentrates. The only thing was the labeling on the edible or the concentrate didn't necessarily provide adequate information for how they should, the doses that they should take. So they had to figure out on their own that certain products, they needed to take a lighter hit according to them, or less hits altogether. How, as a commission, do you know of any states that are striking that balance in terms of providing an array and a variety of edibles to meet patient need, while at the same time providing the adequate and safe information that they also need in order to take that product safely and securely?
Well, I think the important thing is to have consistent dosages indicated on the products. For example, in California and several other states, there is chocolate bars that it's clearly labeled, and divided into 2.5 gram rectangles of chocolate, and there's clearly labeled 5 milligrams per serving, 5 milligrams of THC per serving, and 100 milligrams of THC per package. So, that kind of precision packaging and labeling, I think, will go a long way towards providing for a safe experience with edible products. And I can get you more information about various states and that have, adequate labeling, Mr. Barker. I'd be happy to provide that information too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Wolski.
Any other questions from our commissioners? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Wolski. Director Brown, can you please call our next speakers?
Yep, next we have Chuck Latini, and then from the American Planning Association, followed by Dr. Mikhail Kogan, followed by Dr. Beatriz Carlini from the University of Washington Addictions, Drug and Alcohol Institute. So first we're going to go to Chuck Latini. Chuck, you should be unmuted.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for the invitation to provide our thoughts. I don't really have anything to offer on the concentrate side. I am a flower guy by introduction. So, but I am indeed Chuck Latini, president of the American Planning Association, New Jersey chapter. Our members include most of the planning and zoning practitioners working across the 565 municipalities in the state. There's a lot of discussion within the planning community about how to deal with the August 21st deadline, as many towns weigh their options, as you know. None of us were really granted any favors with this timeline that was baked into the legislation, especially as municipalities have to adhere to the planning and zoning requirements, including, importantly, the notice provisions of the municipal land use law. Understanding these requirements of the municipal land use law is important from two perspectives. One, the time it takes to properly adopt ordinances. And part of that, but most importantly, is alleviating the potential challenges to the validity of zoning for those who fail to adhere to those requirements, which could come from both the industry itself by jilted prospective applicants or even adjacent municipalities. Our problem at this point is how to rectify these requirements against this ticking clock. Well, some communities are choosing to opt out, as you know, which is hard to blame them. Municipalities behave very differently when it comes to new legislation, state mandates, and the like. Some wait for more direction, while others are a bit more proactive. All depends. But Jeff, thank you for the update you gave. That in and of itself is very helpful. Towns do enjoy official updates, and in many cases they need them, regardless of what our professional consultants are telling them. That said, my recommendations for your consideration are severalfold. One is the CRC provide some semblance of a timeline how you're going to specifically act. This includes both the interim standards and any zoning guidance that you plan to put out, in addition to guidance on various local administrative controls that the legislature has provided the towns. On the zoning side, I would recommend you staying instructive rather than prescriptive, and I think past practice has shown that you will. This includes both so I recommend you be more instructive rather than prescriptive. The regs, I do agree that the regulations itself do provide some insights, but moving forward, I would recommend a development of a list of considerations that towns might have to deal with as they zone themselves, but let them ultimately continue to work out those details, particularly with regard to adult use, the drug-free school zones, and any federal implications thereof are still technically in play, but also some of the options for mitigation. The mayor spoke a little bit about this. Public health safety, but odor mitigation technologies available, those kind of things that they could bake into the ordinances to be more comfortable. Towns may wish to include buffers. Others may look at them differently. As long as they know the implications of their decisions, I say, you know, giving differential is really a great place to continue to stay. But the CRC should consider to make assertive statements on the record so that they are comfortable. On the administrative side, the local licensing side, however, this is where I think you all could be most helpful. First, local knowledge of this control has been found to alleviate some of their concerns when they know they can legitimately put forth rules they can guide systematically with thoughtful implementation. However, additional guidance needs to be put out as to specifics on how they can do this, including some best practices, and particularly of concern is why transparency in this process needs to be paramount on their end, all of our end. But it also will increase the local opportunities through this transparency to offer everyone the opportunity to get into the door, especially potential micro licenses who might not have access to lobbyists and the like getting in the door. As important as making sure we avoid onerous local host impact agreements in the process that'll drown the industry. The second recommendation, I'm going to echo the mayor's thoughts, is the award of the 2019 applications. Why? A lot of great reasons, as you all know, but awarding these applications will give municipalities a good idea of who will be operating in addition to all the satellite sites you've been approving, so they can really make informed decisions and not be concerned about overload of certain types of businesses. How their new ordinance unfolds will be influenced by this announcement for sure.
Hey, Chuck, you hit 5 minutes, so a couple more points, and then we'll move on to Q and see if any of the commissioners have any questions.
Yes. So the CRC should also, third point is CRC should provide us with some detail on how it plans to unveil new licenses in terms of future RFAs. Are you going to open up all license categories, or will you attempt to facilitate cultivation, manufacturing, and testing first? I say this because some of the discussions we're having on the local level is do we just support every license category that comes forward? So lastly, you know, developing this new industry takes collaboration. And your process here is definitely one that is welcomed. You know, there's certainly a lot of intellectual capital throughout the state. And that being said, APA New Jersey is here to continue to assist you if called upon to help you guide best practices in planning and zoning. But also we have some thoughts, and we've been kicking around a lot of ideas regarding micro licenses. So being 2.5 months away from this August deadline, you know, some clarity will certainly help additional towns be in the game rather than, you know, sitting on the bench waiting for everybody else to make a decision. So thank you for providing us the opportunity and assisting you by sharing our thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Latini. Any questions from our commissioners for Mr. Latini? Nope, hearing none. Thank you again, Mr. Latini, for your time and for your comments this afternoon.
Great. So next we had Dr. Mikhail Kogan from the Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I don't see Dr. Kogan in the attendee list here. So I'm going to go next to Dr. Carlini, Dr. Beatrice Carlini from the University of Washington Addictions, Drug and Alcohol Institute. So Dr. Carlini, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm a little challenged on this domain. Okay, well, thanks so much for having me. Dear members of New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, my name is Beatrice Carlini, and I have a PhD in social psychology and a master in public health. I work at the Addictions, Drug and Alcohol Institute, ADAI, at the University of Washington, Seattle, where I chair the ADI Cannabis Research and Education Work Group. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you and share my concerns of the increasing availability of high THC products for non-medical consumption. And I really want to emphasize this. The concerns I express here today is about the availability of high THC potency products for recreational, adult, or non-medical use. Research available to date point unanimously in one direction. There is a dose relationship response between THC potency, frequency of use, and negative consequences. In other words, as THC potency increases, so does the harms associated with it. For the sake of brevity, I want to specifically emphasize two of these harms today. The first one is the risk of developing psychotic disorders. The most common of them is schizophrenia. Frequent use of high THC potency increasing several orders of magnitude the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychosis 5 to 10 years later. Of course, we're not suggesting that using cannabis is the cause of schizophrenia in itself. Science documents that mental illness is caused by interplay of genetics with life events and circumstances. In the case of schizophrenia, one of these life events is frequent use of cannabis, particularly high THC ones. Tightly regulating the production of and commercialization of high potency cannabis for non-medical use can protect use from developing psychosis later on, which seems something strongly backed by science and almost like a moral obligation. A second issue is high potency cannabis, with high potency cannabis is the increased risk of developing cannabis use disorder, also called addiction or dependence. High potency THC products used frequently are much more likely to hook people up and make it hard to give up on cannabis if they wanted to do so. And I know there is a myth long debunked by science that cannabis cannot make people addicted. In fact, it can, and this is particularly high or more likely in the case of high potency products. Last but not least, tightly regulating high potency cannabis is a matter of equity. Our local data analyzing CDC information shows that use of high potency THC cannabis through dabbing affects disproportionately adults from ethnic and racial minorities, low income, no health insurance, and those reporting poor mental health. This reality, if confirmed in other states, may perpetuate and exacerbate the inequities faced by these historically marginalized populations, which I'm sure is not the intent of people in the great state of New Jersey. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carlini. I'm glad we were able to make it to our public meeting this afternoon from on the West Coast. Do any of our commissioners have any questions for Dr. Carlini?
Chairwoman
do have-
Waynu, I do. Commissioner Nash.
Go ahead, Commissioner Nash.
Thank you. Dr. Carlini, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to meet you on Zoom. And thank you for your comments on the use of the non-medical use of cannabis. But I would like to get some input, especially for towns that are banning the medical dispensaries. I'm a social worker and I worked with people who had co-occurring disorders. On more than one occasion, I've had to revive someone with Narcan. And in 2020, New Jersey lost over 3,000 residents to opioid addiction. And I think one death is too many. So I'd like to know if you would speak a little bit about pain management and how marijuana can benefit some to avoid having to turn to opioids.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, I would say this is a very interesting, important question, and by no means I'm questioning the importance of having a well-regulated cannabis market for people that benefit medically from it. By no means I'm questioning that. I think your point is well taken. For many people, cannabis have the ability to manage pain in a much more efficacious way and less damaging way than other alternatives. And I stand by it. And I'm actually impressed by the focus of this committee on the cannabis from the medicinal aspect. It's not exactly what happened in my state, I can tell you. So this is very impressive. So my comment is really about using non-medically, so in Washington State, non-medical, highly concentrated products are highly advertised and went from 9% to 35% of the market share in 2 years and in 4 years, and is growing exponentially. And this is not related, from the best of our knowledge, to the needs of patients of controlling pain. Is much more a marketing strategy from the industry that want to sell their products. And we know these are very shelf stable, cheaper products to sell. And this is entering the market, non-medical market in Washington State in a great amount. So it's a different thing. I'm hoping I'm being reasonably clear that are two different processes here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barker?
Dr. Carlini, thank you so much again. The insight that you provided definitely was helpful in our decision-making process. I did want to ask about, I think you mentioned early in your remarks, as THC potency increases, so do the harms associated with it. So it made me think of alcohol, and I thought, there are, all different levels of alcohol and all different, depending on what you buy, it has more or less, proof, greater proofs, harsher alcohols. Nonetheless, I feel like though as a society, individuals know themselves, know what their limits are, and we allow for that. We allow individuals to make responsible decisions about their consumption levels and what they can and cannot handle. And so my question is, and considering everybody, even considering individuals that may want, edibles or concentrates, or for that matter, higher THC products altogether, in your experience and expertise, is there a responsible way to do this, or is it your opinion that we should avoid this altogether to protect people from those dangers?
Yeah, thanks for your comment. Very interesting. Okay, so I do believe that people can make responsible decisions and titrate, maybe is a technical term, but adjust their dose to their intake to get the effect they want. This is possible for sure. When we look at cannabis, there's not a lot of research, but when we look, people don't necessarily do that. Can they do? Yeah, they can. It's possible to do, but they don't in fact do it too much. Independent of this, the main concern here is that even if you use responsibly, meaning you still go to work, you still go to school, you still take care of your family, you still can function in society, the exposure to these high products, unless something new, totally new research comes on, clearly shows that as you are exposed to this high potency frequently, you do increase your chances to develop schizophrenia. This is not a issue of morality or, this happens. You can say, well, but this is just 1% of the people in the country has schizophrenia. And like probably 30% of this is caused by use of cannabis. It might be, we don't know. The thing is 1% is for the degree of stigma associated with this condition, or the degree of disability and suffering. It's something to take in consideration. So this is unrelated to being able to responsible use. It's really an issue of being exposed to it. Hope I'm making myself clear, but anyway, yeah. Particularly if you're young. You get schizophrenia usually in your early 20s to early 30s. So that 5-year, 10-year is where your use of high potency cannabis are putting people at risk. So you may say, let's educate people. Yeah, that's something already, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. And just real quick, is there, in that same vein, is there a THC cap that you recommend on products?
Yeah, okay. So the cap is so unreal for the current market, but I can tell what it is. So if you look at all the research that has been done with cannabis, is they are done with until 10% THC. And in Washington State, our flowers are 20%. So this is not even possible to go back. But having 60–80% of THC content, it's highly not advisable. So that's why we separate just basically flower versus highly manufactured products. That is everything else that means extracting that plant that helps so many people are manufactured, extracted to become something else, which is a gooey kind of, essence of cannabis. And that's when the magic of the plant starts potentially backfiring. So we divide into plants and manufactured products. That's what we are doing to make our case, because it's very hard to have a decent cap to define. Yeah. Is that making sense?
Yes, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Very
Well,
helpful.
Dr. Carlini, I just have one more question related to the schizophrenia and cannabis use. Were the subjects vetted in terms of any prior family diagnosis of schizophrenia? Was there any correlation between the cannabis and maybe a family member having that?
excellent question. Absolutely. As I said before, I mean, a big component of schizophrenia is genetic. There is no reason. And actually, even for medicinal purpose, we know that responsible providers screen for previous schizophrenia in the family. And even if they need for alleviating their pain, it's a very risky thing to use cannabis when you have history, family history. The studies that are available, I would say the most serious one that I considered was around 1,000 patients, were done in 10 different cities in Europe. Research in the United States is a whole other testimony here. But anyway, some of them, yeah, they had family members and did not develop schizophrenia, although they had family members because they did not use. Some developed because they use. So you have everything of it. It's very, the risk increases. And then if you have family, your risk is already very high. Doesn't mean that it's a certainty that you're going to develop. And also doesn't mean if you have 0 people in your household, in your family that had schizophrenia, that you are safe. It's a genetic, and the genetic is not like linear, it's hard to pinpoint. So
Thank you very much.
Dr. Carlini, I have one question for you. I understand your comments and concerns are primarily around high potency products for non-medical use. When we do look at the medical programs, do we start to see some of the same concerns or same risks appearing in the medical community that might be using, when patients might be using some high potency products as well? Or does that tendency tend to be lower because they might not be using these high potency products as frequently?
The truth is we don't know that yet. Again, this is all so new to be able to control for. But what I would say about cannabis used for medical purpose, usually they have way more cannabidiol or CBD in it, which balances a lot of the effects of THC and may modulate and decreases the risk. So when I say this is for non-medical use, typically a non-medical user is trying to get high, and what gets you high is the THC. So to get high in a concentrate, usually they are concentrated in the recreational market for high THC and not high CBD. So that's the first thing. The second is many medications have risks, and cannabis is no different. Of course, a good clinician would see the pros and cons, and for instance, to take the chronic pain, to have excruciating chronic pain that you cannot function, that is alleviated by cannabis, as opposed to a risk, which is, of course, schizophrenia is not a common issue. It might be worthwhile to risk and have your medication offered to you and taken as compared, for instance, to opioids that may be a bigger risk. So it's all for any medication we take. You can see, like smoking, there's nothing that kills more than smoking. But if you take some of the medications, some of them can give you suicide thoughts, you can be aggressive. I mean, this is a risk you take because it's so important to quit smoking. So it's always risk versus benefit, which for recreational, what is really the point of risking it in this case?
Thank you, Dr. Carlini. That's very helpful. If there are no other questions, I'll thank you again, Dr. Carlini, for your time, and your comments this afternoon is very helpful for us.
It was a pleasure. And I will upload the reports we prepared in Washington State about the issue of high potency cannabis. Is 10 scientists we wrote together to serve as a policy statement for our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carlini. So I think Dr. Mikhail Kogan is back on. Dr. Kogan, you should be able to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me talk. Just a 2 minutes, 60 seconds introduction. I am a physician. I'm associate professor of medicine at George Washington University. I'm a medical director of the Center for Integrative Medicine here at George Washington University, as well as associate director of the several fellowship programs, including geriatrics and palliative care. I've been in practice since 2007. I've been one of the early adopters of medical cannabis in District of Columbia. At this point, I recommended it for over 3,000 patients, as well as in Maryland and Virginia. So I know quite a bit about the topic. I am kind of a to-go person at George Washington University for most of the referrals, as well as I am the one who chairing the committee at the hospital use, nursing home, and other utilization of the medical cannabis in our institution. In addition, I am a member of the board at Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I teach extensively on this topic internationally, and we're developing several courses. We're also setting up several randomized trials in partnership with industry, more specifically for pain, since this is my main interest. So specifically, I was asked to talk about high potency, non-inhaled products, edibles, etc., recreational versus medical. Well, first of all, let me point out that I do have a number of patients in my practice who have been heavy users, who have transitioned from recreational to medical, in hundreds, if not in thousands of patients. And I'm extremely comfortable kind of navigating the realm between recreational to medical, especially when there has been a history of cannabis abuse in the past, or dependence rather than abuse. So my take on this is following two lines. So line number one is the safety. I think that trying to regulate dosing percentages and safety is completely irrelevant and not physically possible, and it's just waste of time and effort. I feel that way more important to concentrate on clear labeling, on child protecting bottling, as well as assuring of the quality. I was extremely pleased to hear how committee is trying to, I was actually listening until 2:30 when I had a patient. I'm sorry, I had to leave. I'm covering hospital. We had an emergency meeting. So it was really good to see that you're setting up a very high grade testing facilities to make sure, and I hope that that will go not just for medical, but for recreational as well. And in my opinion, the testing of recreational and medical should be exactly the same. They should not be only tested for active ingredients. They have to be tested for contaminants, especially for mold. As you all probably heard, there have been deaths associated with the mold toxicity in legal recommendations, not in illegal. So that's a big significant issue. And unfortunately, a lot of the times recreational products are not tested because the testing for contaminants is much more expensive than just for active ingredients. We're talking about hundreds of dollars versus, $50. It's a significant difference. In terms of the reason I mentioned that I don't believe that the potency percentages and dosages, well, first of all, there's no data to support to say something that very high dose of THC in one setting is going to be associated with any significant long-term problems. For example, the prior speaker was discussing only evidence on inhaled forms. There's no such evidence that oral cannabinoids are linked to the schizophrenia. It doesn't exist. Unfortunately, our evidence only comes from recreational field. We simply have no idea what medical field is doing. As you all, of course, know, most of the products nowadays separated in three categories. Category 1, which is a predominant THC, category 2, which is a predominant CBD, and then what's called an equivalent or equal ratio of CBD and THC. So it's not very clear if I give a patient, say, 50 milligrams of THC in combination with 50 milligrams of CBD at bedtime for prolonged time. In my experience, hundreds, if not thousands of my patients are on such doses with no consequences whatsoever. Now, will the science prove that? I don't know. In clinical practice, we see side effects from 1 milligram and we see side effects from 100 milligrams and everywhere in between. And I have right now in the hospital, patient who was admitted for, overdose of narcotics in combination with gabapentin, 84-year-old woman for whom pain clinic has been pushing Neurontin, gabapentin to a dose, which when I saw the patient, I was like, oh my God, why didn't this provider discuss the cannabis use? Because clearly patient would not have ended up in a hospital in this situation. And thank God patient is okay because we intervened early. But in our area, just like sounds like in New Jersey, there are lots of times when that intervention is too late and the patient dies from opioid overdose. So
Dr. Kogan, just note 5 minutes are up. So a couple more points and then want to have time for the commissioners to ask any questions.
Yeah, so I would say that if somebody wants to recreationally take very high dose, whether you have 5 milligrams, 25 milligrams, or 50 milligrams, they'll find their way to do it. They'll simply take more. The same goes for percentage in smokable products. I believe it's the same way. I think if you want to specifically, I already discussed what I think is the real big safety points. Now, I'm not necessarily saying all the products should be allowed. I think in terms of recreational, that is to be determined, of course, by your committee. But I'm just basically saying that in reality, in real practice, and what I'm seeing, that's just not how the real world works. People will, when I say start low, titrate up, and deliver where it needs to go, most people do listen to this. And if we provide correct education to general public, I believe the same will happen with recreational use. And I'll stop here and I'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kogan. I'll start with the questions and then leave room for my fellow commissioners to jump in. You said that you referred to Dr. Carlini's research about focusing on inhaled products. Are you aware of any data that suggests that non-inhaled products would result in different outcomes that were studied?
No, I'm not, but I also aware that such studies need to be done. They simply have not been done. We believe that there will be increased risk of schizophrenia. It's probably true, but it hasn't been done. And moreover, definitely all the prior studies were done with THC alone. We simply don't know if you start adding CBD to the mix. We do believe the risk will go down. It is a theoretical statement what I'm making. I don't think it's backed up by a science.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I make it very clear, I did not bring, everything I said should not be applied to inhaled products. I'm only discussing non-inhaled because I was specifically asked discuss that. I almost never prescribe inhaled products. Many of my patients use it, but that's not where I start anybody on, just as a disclaimer.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners for Dr. Kogan? Vice Chair Delgado, you are on mute.
Yeah, I have a question, Dr. McGill. You speak to clear labeling and childproofing the product.
Mhm.
Can you point or can you recommend any resources out there that the commission can view? Or
Yeah,
research?
absolutely. If you contact Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, one of our funders has created a standard, which I believe should be mandated by every state. Now, of course, I'm not a politician, so I can't speak what if different states pick up different standards. But reality is that there are several standards out there, and definitely the one that I like the most is by Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. So it does exist, and you know, if it's done right and if it's clear, and if every dispensary following the standard, I think it'll dramatically. Let me give you a simple example. Patients often clueless, you know, the THC percentages. They're simply going to pick up whatever they're given, and you know, often labels don't even have a clear mark saying, you know, THC is there, or it's unfortunately all over the place from what we're seeing. And since I see patients in 3 different states, I also have to deal with 3 different labeling systems in essence. And then on top of that, a lot of people go to other states and then bring the products from recreational, even though of course I will tell them not to do it, but you know, it's a free market. So, and then of course those labels also different. And childproof, I think it's a pretty standard technology, it's same as with pills with all the pharmacies. So I believe that's already in place, just needs to be followed.
Thank you, Doctor.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you very much, Dr. Kogan, for your time and your comments today. Director Brown, giving you a promotion here. I believe that is all for our invited guests. So please proceed with calling the next 3 speakers who have signed up to speak.
That's correct. And I'm going to hand the mic over to our esteemed communications director, Tony Ann Blake, who's going to call folks who are going to speak in the public comment portion. Just note, we do have a number of people signed up. So, you know, just reminder of the chair's you know, specifications to keep comments under 3 minutes, keep them as concise as possible here, because we do have a lot of folks to get through, and we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So Tony Ann, why don't you call our speakers?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for hanging with us. I'm going to be calling 5 names at a time. If you are present, I ask that you use the hand raise button so that it's easy for me to find you. I will give you 2 calls. If I don't see your name, I will move on to the next. The first 5, Robert Devine, Dan Jensen, Aubrey Navarro Conway, Sonia Jaworski, and Giovanni Figueroa. Is Robert Devine available? Please use the hand raise signal. I see you, and I will unmute you now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Devine. I wanted to thank you for giving me the time to speak today. I've been an NJMMP patient for a little over 3 years, and a cannabis user for about 19 years. I personally believe all cannabis products and their variations, flowers, edibles, and concentrates should be available to both medical users in the state and to the adult use market. I would also like the state to drop the 350 milligram THC cap for concentrated products or edible packages. Right now, all vapor cartridges, edibles are limited to 350 milligrams per package, and all this makes patients do is pay more for their medicine, take a few more hits of that vapor cartridges, or take a few extra lozenges. I really can't understand the reason for continuing a 350 milligram THC cap for concentrated products in a legal cannabis state. NJ residents voted to legalize cannabis, and this means all forms of cannabis that have been available in other states like Colorado, and Maine for many years. New Jersey is severely lagging behind in a variety of products available, and a priority should be made start allowing a varied type of concentrates and edibles in the state for patients who prefer to medicate that way. Products that should be made immediately available to medical patients and available later to the adult use market when it's up and running include, but are not limited to, concentrated cannabis. Current concentrate offerings for patients are severely lacking. Patients need access to higher potency extracts they can vaporize if they prefer to cut down on the times they need to medicate in a day. These products include, but are not limited to, live resin, rosin, like hash rosin and flower rosin, BHO or butane hash oil in its various forms like crumble, butter, sauce, shatter, sugar, etc., Rick Simpson oil or RSO, topicals, alcohol-based tinctures, hash, and keef. Edible products, patients and adults who don't want to or cannot smoke or vaporize cannabis should have a variety of high-quality edibles available to them, and they should be made available to patients as soon as possible. The current lozenges and MCT oil aren't close to enough. Products should be available immediately, include but are not limited to infused beverages like iced tea, soda, lemonades. I can personally speak that these types of edibles are the most effective for me. Various candies, which should be in child-safe packaging and kept away from children, like chocolate, gummies, and lollipops. Various baked goods like brownies, cookies, cakes, etc. Various strengths of capsules, and beverage enhancers / drops that could be added into any beverage. And I know that the CRC doesn't exactly, can't really do anything about home grow, but I just wanted to emphasize the importance of home grow, especially for medical patients, to try to subsidize the cost of the 400 plus average an ounce of flower that we're currently paying in New Jersey. Wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to when dispensaries in NJ can start to resemble dispensaries in more established states like Maine, Colorado, and California.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Devine? Hearing none, we'll move to our next speaker.
Aubrey Navarro.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the opportunity today, and I really appreciate that medical is finally being given the consideration for the reliefs that were included in Jay Conan's law almost 2 years ago that we haven't seen come to fruition. So I just wanted to mention that some of those protections in Jake's law for patients, my interest is solely in medical and how the impact of legalization may have an impact on medical. So with patients that I work with, I've been a patient advocate for almost 7 years now. Patients that I work with are usually terminal or juveniles. Something that I wanted to mention about the edibles is that it's extremely important that we have a sugar-free option. It's really important for, let's say, Crohn's patients or patients with similar illnesses like that, where you might be trying to treat something and treat something with cannabis, and the method that you're choosing may be counterproductive. So let's say edibles become legal. Edibles become more common with medical. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say we have a brownie and I need 200 milligrams, right? If the brownie is 200 milligrams, I have to eat that whole brownie. But if I had something else that's concentrated, like the speaker before me had said, maybe drops in a drink or something like that, I don't need to take in all that sugar while I'm taking in my 200 milligrams. So that's crucial for insulin dependent patients, people with Crohn's, people with cancer, children with seizures. That's another thing. If we could just give them a couple drops of something such as RSO, Rick Simpson oil, to relieve those seizures, we should be doing that instead of trying to get them to eat a brownie. So that's something. And I also believe the 350 milligram cap, that's going to run into an issue when we're talking about concentrates. Maybe not so much edibles, but again, as another speaker said, if in the legal market, somebody really wants to have and ingest 500 milligrams, they're going to. So in the medical program, limiting the reliefs by putting a cap on the THC kind of isn't going to make sense going forward when we're talking about things like concentrate, RSO. We can't even have that as a product here because of the cap on the THC. I also wanted to mention that we still have patients in New Jersey that are getting beat up. They're getting pulled over, they're getting beat up, they're getting
Ms. Navarro-Conway, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, so we need to work better on trickling down that information to the law enforcement and try to limit those things because patients should not be experiencing that. Perhaps the AG could work with us on getting that information to trickle down. And I just want to quote an advocate that I know you guys are very familiar with, Jeff Oakes. We lost him to cancer last year. I would just like to quote something that he was known for saying is, when you lead with compassion, the rest will fall into place. So I urge the commission to remember that we're leading with, I understand legalization is a big deal, but we need to lead with compassion and make sure that this medical program is everything that we want it to be, while also trying to get legalization up off the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Navarro Conway. Do any commissioners have questions for our speaker? Hearing none, we'll move to the next speaker.
Last calls for Robert Devine, I'm sorry, Dan Jensen, Sonia Jaworski, and Giovanni Figueroa. I want to remind everyone to make sure that the name on the screen is the name that you registered with as well. The next 5 are Daniel Sloat, Neil Wilner, Zach Katzen, Linda Bush, PhD, and Paul Josephson. If you are present, please raise your hand, use the hand raise feature, and I will open the floor to you. Those 5 names are Daniel Sloat, Neil Wilner, Zach Katzen, Linda Bush, Paul Josephson. I see Neil Wilner.
Good afternoon. This is Neil Wilner. How is everybody today? I appreciate the commissioner's time to be able to speak and provide comment on behalf of the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp's Cannabis Beverage Council. I serve as I'm an attorney, and I work with the Beverage Council for Attach. Just by way of background, Attach is a 501c6 trade organization that promotes the expansion, protection, and preservation of businesses engaged in the legal trade of industrial, medical, and recreational cannabis-based and hemp-based products. Attach has been named the Trade Association of the Year and Corporate Grassroots Organization of the Year by Campaign and Election Magazine. Attach's membership includes some of the most influential businesses, as well as state, national, federal, and international cannabis trade associations and organizations. Attach has recently entered into a historic memorandum of understanding with ASTM International to develop standards for the cannabis industry, and has launched a pilot cannabis certification program in conjunction with ASTM International and the Policy Center for Public Health and Safety to standardize the cannabis industry. In January 2021, Attach launched the first of its kind Cannabis Beverage Council, bringing together cannabis and hemp beverage producers, manufacturers, distributors, and mainstream beverage companies to advocate for cannabis and hemp drinks as a viable and safe new marketplace. Membership comprises of cannabis industry leaders, state-level advisors, and key members of the beverage industry. Council members include Canopy Growth, Can, Fertosa, Kalo, Scott Coors, Adolphus Bush V, Columbia Distributing, Organigram, Bell Rock Brands, and so on. We work to promote coordinated cannabis beverage advocacy and education, and assist in aligning national and state efforts through coordination of a multi-state approach. Attach urges the CRC to consider the beverage form factor as a viable and non-oil-based product for both the medical program and recreational program. From the medical cannabis perspective, cannabis beverages provide efficacy. It is a predictable form factor that acts quickly and effectively. Our Beverage Council members have conducted dozens of market studies and hundreds of tasting sessions with new patients and users, and they can say with confidence that beverage is the most approachable form factor and is easily adopted by patients, especially ones that have been previously turned off by other form factors like smoking. Like tinctures, cannabis beverages and the medicine they contain are absorbed through the oral mucosal tissues in the patient's mouth, creating much more rapid absorption into the bloodstream. Indeed, after consumption, the patient's digestive system immediately begins breaking down the cannabinoids, whereas oil-based products and edibles pass through and get processed by the liver. And because the liver is good at its job, it tends to also process out some of the cannabinoid content, lowering
Mr. Wilner, you have 30 seconds.
As a medicine used primarily for pain relief, a rapid, predictable onset is exactly what a patient needs. Unlike edibles, which can take 60 to 90 minutes to affect the patient, properly emulsified cannabis beverages permits the patient to feel its effects within minutes, providing nearly instant relief. Beverages should also be available to recreational users for similar reasons. From a recreational standpoint, cannabis beverage is an approachable and discreet form factor that does not create unwanted smoke from flower or vaporizing products. And due to these new advances in emulsification technology, cannabis beverage has a fast-acting onset, permitting the user to much more precisely control the amount of cannabinoids they consume over time. So the Attached Cannabis Beverage Council urges the CRC to consider beverages as a permissible form factor, and we welcome the opportunity to discuss the work we've been doing. Look forward to submitting additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Wilner. Commissioners, do any of you have questions for Mr. Wilner? Hearing none, thank you again, Mr. Wilner, for your time and your comments.
Next up, Mr. Zach Katzen.
Hello, thank you for hearing me today.
Mr. Caston, sorry, one moment. Zach, if you could, just for our notes and record keeping, could you please, your last name does not show up. So could you please pronounce and spell your last name for us?
Sure, my last name is Katzen, K-A-T-Z-E-N. Thank you. My name is Zach Katzen, as stated. I work with Atlantic City on the Atlantic City Cannabis Advisory Committee to the mayor. We have reached out a couple times because we definitely would like to be in contact with the committee to discuss issues moving forward. And one of them, of course, is zoning. As we know, New Jersey is definitely not a one-size-fits-all state. We have so many different aspects of different parts of the state, and Atlantic City is obviously very special. We have 16,000 hotel rooms. We have the ability to hold conventions and marketplaces that rival any other spot on the East Coast. And knowing so, we really need to carve out specific provisions that address Atlantic City's unique potential. There is a very unique potential for Atlantic City to hold a majority of the marketplace for cannabis in New Jersey, especially with other shore towns opting out. We have the hotel rooms, the conventions, and the concerts that all go hand in hand with enjoying cannabis in a recreational setting. We need to make sure that the zoning regulations don't hamper the potential of Atlantic City. Atlantic City and New Jersey could be the home of East Coast cannabis conventions for the next 10 years moving forward if we write the provisions in a correct way that can address it and address the needs of Atlantic City and the convention industry in regards to cannabis. Just think we need to really pay close attention when we're writing the provisions about one-size-fits-all approaches and how we have a unique marketplace with Atlantic City. It's a town of 36,000 people that can see 1 million people in a weekend. And having to serve a recreational marketplace that can swell to 1 million people, being hampered by restrictions that apply to a 30,000 person town just obviously won't fit. Won't fit the marketplace, won't fit the needs to serve our residents or our visitors or our medical patients. So we really need to take that into consideration. I believe one of the ways we can provide equity back to residents, because that's one of the questions we're asked all the time, is how we want ownership, we want in. I think consumption lounges, if we can remove the provisions that mandate consumption lounges have to be attached or connected to a dispensary itself, opening up more lounges, especially in a place like Atlantic City, just makes sense. We have people here that are spending the night. They're here to consume cannabis and have fun and relax. And if we don't have enough lounges to serve them in that population, then we're really doing a disservice, not just to our patients and our visitors, but also to our residents. This is a place where we can have ownership back.
Mr. Katzen, you have 30 seconds.
Yes. And just quickly, I'm also a medical patient for a number of years. I suffer from Crohn's and from PTSD. As far as edibles, low dose edibles can help me with my PTSD, but when I'm suffering a Crohn's outbreak, I think that high dose edibles are the ones that actually can and do actually change and affect pain. I was prescribed pills, pain medication I was supposed to take for the rest of my life. I haven't taken them for 6 years since I've been a cannabis prescribed patient. I think also high dose allows equity. It allows people who have to travel far distances to a dispensary to pick up a product that they can, again, like was said before, use a couple drops of and last them throughout the month, so they don't have to make multiple drives and trips back. Sorry to try to jam all this in at once, but just wanted to make sure that everything was heard and I got all my points across. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Katzen. Any questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move to the next speaker. Again, folks, please, if you can, keep your comments to 3 minutes. We've heard from 10 speakers so far, and we had more than 43 signed up. So we want to get a chance to hear from as many people as possible.
The next 5 speakers are Stephen Pardilis, Atola Jerry Budd, Christopher Martinez, Nicholas K, Brittany Wallace. Please use your full names and use the hand raise feature, please. First up is Stephen Pardilis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Pardalis, and I sit on the Bloomingdale, New Jersey local Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which was formed to advise the town and the mayor and the council as to plans for a municipality. Those of you that are unfamiliar with Bloomingdale, it's a small town in North Jersey. It's approximately 6,000 residents, a couple square miles. It's a small suburban town that has expressed interest in being open to retail marijuana sales in an area of the state where many of the towns are prohibiting them outright. I will tell you, we're facing a lot of challenges with this deadline and with being unsure of how this is going to work. We have very little understanding of what our next steps are supposed to be. At this point, it's being discussed prohibiting just to be safe by August, to not have to be under some deadline, and then eventually undoing that and then coming up with the regulations and the ordinances necessary. So at this point, I would just express a concern with the practical nature of it. There's only a few meetings this summer in order to get everything together by the August deadline. And a lot of this is forcing our hand into having prohibited and then go ahead and go back on that prohibition, which again, that presents challenges from the town, from the public, from our residents, going out and then going back in. So I really would like to ask if there's anything that the council, the commission is considering helping out with our towns, the towns that are open to this, that want to do this, especially in an area of the state where many, if not most of the towns don't want any part of it. So sort of what's happening next? What are we waiting for? What can we do rather than just an outright prohibition and hoping that we have an understanding later? The last, a smaller point would be sort of a question as to what we can be doing as a town to sort of let the applicants know that we are open to potential retail marijuana sales in our little small municipality. You know, we're not a giant commercial town. We don't have a ton of resources, but we're open to it. And, you know, you said that there's going to be some kind of, applications to the state, and then that'll be passed along, preferences to municipalities. So are we going to be looking at a list of places that are considering opening and then deciding if we would like to, be open to them operating in our town? What if we're contacted directly? Then do we go to the state if someone comes to us and says that they're interested? Again, we have a lot of openness to this idea. And I will tell you, we sit at each meeting and we feel a little bit lost, even at work with the council and our town attorney. So I thank you guys for your time here. And if you can address any of those, I think it would be really helpful. And I don't think we're probably the only smaller New Jersey town that's interested in this, that feels a little bit lost at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Pardalis. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Are there any questions from our commissioners? All right, just one note. Vice Chair, did I see your hand going up? By all means, go ahead. No? Okay. I'll note one thing, Mr. Pardalis. When you're asking about asking for the commission's help in sharing information with the towns about what they can do, we are in conversations with municipalities and associations of municipalities to share out what we are doing on our end and how best we can share information as we move forward so that we can work together in preparing communities for the cannabis industry. A lot is still yet to be decided as the commission still has to develop its rules and regulations governing this industry, but we are committed to keep continuing our conversations with the municipalities as they are very much key stakeholders in this process as well. So thank you for your time and for your remarks this afternoon. We'll move to the next speaker.
The next speaker up is Jerry Budd. I ask everyone again, the other names on this section are Christopher Martinez, Nicholas K, Brittany Wallace. If your name was called previously, please raise your hand and you'll be added to the list. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to address you. My line of questioning is very much similar to Mr. Pardalis, except I'm an individual. I'm not associated with a township or any organization. I'm trying, hopefully we'll be starting a business. I understand from the regulations that I'll probably be needing Class 6 license for delivery. And my question is, if anyone could possibly look at, if you could promulgate like a timeline. I understand that the August deadline is coming up, but it's been very vague out here at ground level. Like, what are the regulations? How do you get a license? How do you apply? How do you break in? I understand that your town has to approve the sale of recreational marijuana. If your town does not approve it, would you be denied a license? Can you incorporate in a different town? My question is, as a general one, as an individual hoping to open a business, what does one do and how does one know when and how to do it?
Thank you, Ms. Budd. Any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Budd?
Don't even tell me. I'm just hoping for some answers.
Yes, Ms. Budd. Do trust it in due time. Once we have the answers, you all will have the answers as well. Part of the process is, having a space for public input, right, so that we can hear from members of the public and from stakeholders about what they wish to see in these rules and regulations, including what do they want applicants to have to provide, and should applicants be able to, transfer or move to a different location, right? So some of those questions that you're asking and you're raising today are the questions that we hope to answer, and we are looking to you and your neighbors for insight into how we should be answering them when we develop our rules. So while we might not have firm answers for you today on these questions, we do hope that your questions will be answered in due course.
I realize how overwhelmingly busy you all are. I really respect how hard you're working, and this has been a very informative meeting. I was wondering if possibly on the website or in any kind of regular update, you could let us know what the status is of the decision making as of now, if that's possible.
We will circle up and we'll take that under consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Last call for Christopher Martinez, Nicholas K, Brittany Wallace. The next up are Dr. Rahi Abuk, Lisa Gallagher, Jessie Marie Villers, Curtis Goddard, and Evan Manoresi. If any of those individuals are present, please raise your hand and I will unmute you. First up is Dr. Rahi Abuk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is Rahi Abouk, and I am the director of the Cannabis Research Institute at William Patterson University. I would like to have a follow-up discussion on the issues raised by Dr. Carlini and Dr. Kogan. Actually, I want to explain about the findings of my ongoing research about the potential effects of the CBD laws. And basically, this finding suggests that CBD could be basically a substance that could be used as a substitute for THC, which all of us know that it has some adverse impact on adverse psychoactive impacts and so on. So in this research, I used data from 2010 to 2018 and evaluated the effect of medical CBD laws. About 11 states across the US adopted CBD laws and not THC laws like conventional medical marijuana laws on opioid overdose death, opioid-related hospitalization, and some other outcomes. So my findings suggest that after states adopt CBD laws for medical purposes, the opioid-related death declines by about 30 to 40%, suggesting that CBD could be used as a pain medication and as a substitute for conventional THC cannabis. So I also find that consumption of cannabis declines by about 6 to 10%, suggesting that CBD and THC are substitutes, and basically users substitute these two products when state laws allow for obtaining medical CBD. So overall, these findings suggest that probably we should have a particular and closer look to promoting CBD products in addition to THC product. This way, we don't need to deal with the driving under the influence of the THC, which is certainly a big problem. And there are some randomized controlled trial studies suggesting that CBD products would not lead to basically fatal accidents, or the rate is not based, it is much lower than the rate for THC products. So therefore, I think CBD could be basically considered as a very promising ingredient of the cannabis plant that could definitely have potential.
Dr. Abouk, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. That could potentially be used as a safe alternative to THC. And that would be something that New Jersey could basically consider and promote it in their regulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Abouk. Do we have any questions for the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you, Dr. Abouk, once again for your time and your comments this afternoon.
The next speaker will be Jessie Marie Villers. I'm getting a message that she doesn't have the ability to speak. Then we're going to go to Evan Manaresi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First, I wanted to respond to the researcher from Washington State, I believe it was. I'm hoping that maybe you guys would take the time to listen to a podcast. It's the Shaping Fire podcast hosted by Shango Los. Episode 72, he interviewed neuroscientist Greg Gerdeman, who picks apart the report that she was referencing. And it's really informative. And I think that you'll find that some of the science there is not really strong. But on to my statement. I'm a New Jersey native and lifelong resident of South Jersey. I'll be applying for a Class 1 microbusiness license to cultivate cannabis. Cannabis is not something to be feared. The people of New Jersey have decided by an overwhelming majority to legalize cannabis. We should let the free market determine which products are and are not available. cannabis is, relatively speaking, tremendously safe. It's been proven that it's very effective for treating countless ailments and diseases as it supports and interacts with our endocannabinoid system. And it's enjoyed by people everywhere as an enhancement to day-to-day life. In fact, one of the many wonderful properties of cannabis is that even when a person overindulges in it, whether that be through too much edibles or dabbing too much or just vaping or smoking too much or too strong a flower, they're going to be uncomfortable and have an unpleasant experience, but that's it. Cannabis does not cause respiratory failure or dangerous toxicity of any kind like opioids or alcohol. Let's focus on sensible education and increased understanding so people can learn how to interact with cannabis in ways that positively impact their lives rather than more prohibition and statutory limits. I'd like to take a moment to address micro businesses as well. There are hundreds of longtime New Jersey residents who care about the state, their towns, their communities, and their neighbors who are planning to apply for micro business licenses. We are regular people who are prepared to stake our life savings, and in many cases, the savings of our friends, families, and investors on cannabis business. We're waiting on you to give us guidance so we can finalize business plans, floor plans for facilities, financial models, SOPs, security plans, and the list goes on and on. If you want to see equality in the marketplace, please open up micro business licenses as soon as possible. We understand that it's an enormous undertaking to set up regulations for this industry. However, the regulatory thresholds, logically speaking, should be much lower for micro businesses, as the limit on the size of our businesses will greatly limit any unintended negative consequences of those businesses operating. Furthermore, please consider making the licensing of micro business cultivators your very top priority. It will take cultivators the better part of 6 months, likely longer, to get a facility up and running and get product ready to sell to retail and manufacturing partners. Meanwhile, retail and manufacturing licensees will be competing for what small amount of products the ATCs might be allowed and willing to wholesale to them. Before I close, I want to address a few very specific concerns. As I review the legislation and try to plan and prepare for a license application, there are 2 areas of the definition of a micro business that need immediate clarification. In the case of a cultivator, how will our canopy be measured in light of the 2,500 square foot limit? And will we be allowed an additional 2,500 square foot for office space, trimming and packaging, storage, drying and curing, bathrooms, etc.? And perhaps even more critically, how will the requirement to possess no more than 1,000 plants per month be interpreted and enforced? Depending on how the commission enforces these
Mr.
two metrics,
Manaresi, you're out of time.
Do you want me to finish or not?
Finish your sentence, please.
It could be very difficult for micro businesses to operate profitably. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manaresi. Any questions from the commissioners?
Thank you for your input. I just want to know the name of the podcast that you mentioned. I didn't get that.
The podcast is Shaping Fire. And all of his podcasts are phenomenal, but I was specifically speaking about episode 72. I looked it up a few minutes ago. And he references the same exact study that she did, about 1,000 cases. And well, I'll let you listen to it yourself. Some of the definitions are really hollow.
No problem. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move to our next speaker.
Next 5 are Anthony Deal, Jessica Gonzalez, Joshua Perez, Antonio Jimenez, and Robert Miller. If any of those people are here, please raise your hand and I will put you in the queue. Those names again are Anthony Deal, Jessica Gonzalez, Joshua Perez, Antonio Jimenez, and Robert Miller.
And Ms. Blake, were we able to fix the issue with Jessie Marie Villas?
I was not. I get a message that says allowed to talk is not available because this is an older version of Zoom.
Okay, so we invite that individual, if you could make sure that your comments are heard and submitted to the commission by sending us an email at mmPquestions@doh.nj.gov or using our website nj.gov/cannabis/meetings to submit your comments to us online.
I also want to remind everyone that your screen name needs to be the same name that you registered with that is the name that we will be looking for and that we will recognize. Last call, Anthony Deal, Jessica Gonzalez, Joshua Perez, Antonio Jimenez, and Robert Miller. Seeing none of those people present, we're going to move on to the next 5. Paula Weinberg, Patrick Duff, David Kerr, Shia Broadchendel, and Corey Mack. Paula Weinberg, Patrick Duff, David Kerr, Shia Broadchendel, and Corey Mack. If any of those individuals are present, please use the raised hand feature and you will be put in the queue. Okay, we're going to move on. I know we lost a lot of people with our technical trouble earlier. Kevin Odenwalder, Charles Gormali, Esquire, Susan Ciaretto, Eric Jiang, Edward Salzman. Are any of those individuals present? I see Charles Nomali, and I will allow you, I'll put you in the queue to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Gormali. I'm an attorney with Brock Eichler in Roseland, New Jersey, co-chair of our cannabis industry practice group. I'm also a former elected official, mayor, councilman, and chairman of a planning board. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission, and we really appreciate all the important work that you're doing. Land use regulations are certainly important components of the creation of the new business that a 2-to-1 majority of New Jersey residents approved by amendment to our Constitution. At the same time, most folks want, and the legislature agreed, that each of our 565 municipalities can decide if they want to allow cannabis business to locate within their borders. Even before the ability to operate cannabis businesses existed in New Jersey, some municipalities determined that they would not allow the business to be conducted within their towns, whether it be medical or recreational. This experience is not surprising to many in the industry, especially since early adapters in cannabis, Colorado and California, for instance, had similar experiences. While it might curry political favor in particular towns to ban cannabis businesses outright, these decisions are generally based on a lack of understanding of what locating a cannabis business might mean to a community. I recently asked one governing body whether any member of the government had ever even been in a cannabis dispensary anywhere, and what about that experience contributed to their opinion about whether cannabis businesses are good, bad, or neutral for their communities. Anyone who has visited a number of these businesses, either in New Jersey or elsewhere, would be impressed with the safety, professionalism, and efficiency of these operations. Nevertheless, many communities will ban businesses altogether, a result similar in other places as well. Consider, for example, that nearly 70% of the communities in California, a mature and cannabis marketplace, do not allow the businesses to be located in their communities. So be it. Home rule, whether guided by data, experience, and fact, or by moral judgment, false narratives, and anti-vice attitudes, is still home rule, and it's a fact of life, and certainly is in New Jersey. The commission, however, should provide guidance to municipalities. The guidance should be anchored in what we know works in the marketplace for adult use cannabis, and should include the following: both carrot and stick. First, temper the stick. Don't penalize cannabis businesses from a zoning and regulatory standpoint. Cannabis businesses should not be singled out in a local zoning controls any differently than the alcohol industry, whether it be a bar or a liquor store. Locational controls that treat cannabis businesses more restrictively.
Mr. Gormali, you have 30 seconds.
More than alcohol locational control should be avoided. Promote the carrot. The commission should create zoning incentives that are in harmony with local objectives. For example, the commission can weight a license application favorably where the applicant proposes to be located in an area of a community that is environmentally constrained, brownfields or blighted economic areas, for instance, and development favored in locations within the community. This would foster infusion of capital into these locally challenged areas and generally uplift the community from its most challenged locations. Many of us have visited such facilities in other states, and while it takes time, improving these challenge locations will promote non-cannabis businesses as well. Finally, recognize that cannabis businesses do not need to locate everywhere or in every community to have a vibrant business and allow the public to access the product. If that were the case, we would have Whole Foods markets in every community, and we don't. That said, property owners, commercial landlords, and others should be permitted to participate in the marketplace on a level playing field with other businesses. From a pure zoning standpoint, a retail, non-consumption cannabis business is not any more taxing on a local services from the community than a liquor store, and in most instances, probably a lot less impactful. The regulatory requirements for security, inventory control, and entry protocol are far more robust in cannabis businesses and therefore should not be unduly burdened by local government. I don't want to go on any longer, but I did have comments about your second subject as well, but I'll defer them or submit them in writing later. I would also note that do not cede your regulatory authority to municipalities. This is a comprehensive regulatory framework. You should preempt the area 100% and don't let communities tell cannabis businesses what they can and cannot do to comply with the state statute. That's your job, and I think you're doing it well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gormali. Any questions from our commissioners?
Mr. Gormali, I just want to follow up to your last one of your last points. Can you please just share your remarks so we can read them in totality?
Sure. I just briefly, and I won't read my script because I obviously can't write for 3 minutes. I tend to speak too long. So I'll just say this, and some of the speakers already echoed it. The marketplace should determine product availability. If you go into other states with more mature cannabis businesses, medical and recreational, the product mix is determined by what is popular amongst the population. We don't need to worry about high potency products similar to alcohol. You're either a beer drinker or a tequila drinker. There's not going to be much confusion about what you are. You're not going to need somebody to tell you, be careful, don't drink as much tequila as you do beer. You know, you both know that we know that they're both intoxicating substances. And I think it's very important for the government to allow the marketplace and individuals to govern that behavior. I'll leave the science to others, but some of the science you heard here today, particularly from the doctor in Washington, read what she writes to her profession. She admits there is no standard for what high potency cannabis is. Many of these things haven't been studied yet. There's no reason to think that any of the parade of horribles is going to occur with high potency products versus low potency products. People will self-regulate their behavior, and over time will, and obviously will govern their behavior accordingly. And I just use the tequila beer example as a simple one. You know, I like to drink a beer, but I'm just not going to drink it like tequila.
Thank you. Any other questions from our commissioners? Hearing none, thank you again, Mr. Gormali, for your time and comments this afternoon. We'll go to our next speaker.
Yes, Paula Weinberg would be the next speaker. Miss Weinberg.
Unmute. Okay. Hello. Hi. You can hear me, right? Thank you so much for giving me a bit of your time. I'm a New Jersey resident. I am trying to find my way into this space, and I just wanted to just give a little bit of my background. I am actually Canadian born and with Jamaican parents. We're mixed race. And when I grew up in Canada, my parents were the only brown people on the street. And so growing up in Canada, I can tell you back then, when you got arrested for cannabis or drugs, it didn't have that much to do with what color your skin was like it does here. And the reason why I say that is I myself came very narrowly being arrested and being put in jail for 7 years mandatory. I was a cannabis user from a teenager, and I didn't know at the time it was for really, I didn't know it was for medical use. I had crippling anxiety, and that's what helped me. And I did not know I had a couple of joints in a suitcase coming back from Jamaica, visiting my grandparents, and I got caught. And back then in Canada, if you came in with marijuana, you actually could have 7 years mandatory for importing, and there was no amount to it. At least that's what I was told. And the reason why I didn't go to prison for 7 years is because I had friends and family that helped me with money for a lawyer. So the reason why I just bring this up is that it's also about economics. And when we all say that we here in New Jersey, and I really hope we're going to stick to it because I just love New Jersey, we love living here, that we're going to be social equity. It's also about money. And a lot of the big money companies coming from Canada, I'm from there. They don't know the same social equity that you do here. And even I've lived here 40 years, but so I hope that we'll actually do more micro businesses. I don't want to see a bunch any more big CVSs of weed all over that's already here. I'd like to see more small businesses, mom and pop businesses, more unique, like when you go to Amsterdam, but something's a little bit more small and intimate. And that's why I like the idea of the micro businesses and the social equity of having more Black and brown people and more women, more people that have suffered from all that war on drugs that has not been won. And thank you again so much for giving me your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weinberg. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Weinberg? Hearing none, we will move to our next speaker.
And the next person up is Susan Scarratti. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Sharetto, very close. Thank you so much for your time. I just briefly have a statement, and I will listen for any questions. This committee holds every aspect of my future in its hands. I am a disabled female potential entrepreneur, but I am a patient first. I was friends with Jeff Oakes and have the unique perspective he had, which is being a hospital patient, not able to medicate with THC while in the hospital when it provides better, safer pain relief than opioids. Just as an FYI, I am a healthcare provider of 17 years specializing in cardiology. I am forced to take opioids because they are $20 for a month's supply instead of $1,368, which is more than my mortgage. The governor promised to help get people off opioids. I'm not one of the wealthy who gets the benefit of a full prescription of marijuana, which would enable me to eliminate them and 5 other medications. My comment on this is that home grow is the most fair, equitable, and humane thing this community can do for medical patients like me. Lastly, as a future marijuana homemade edibles catering business owner, it's not just about how and where the loans and banking are done. I require legitimate marijuana suppliers to purchase all ingredients or small quantities of a large variety of products as soon as possible. I was going to ask when and how I will be able to do this legally, but I've heard so many people speak on that already, and I know you're not there yet. So I ask you to consider these things that future small micro licensed business owners are kind of freaking out about. I think you've gathered that already though. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sharetto.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story as well, your personal story. Really appreciate that. Do any of the commissioners have any questions?
I do, Madam Chair. So I come from the Department of Health, and we address the opioid epidemic, and that's very near and dear to my heart. A question for you, and thank you for your input. What would you have to say to someone who says, addressing one addiction with another drug like cannabis, right? we've spoken about MAT, the medical alternative treatments. So just from your perspective, what would you have to say to someone who has that kind of argument?
They don't have the addiction themselves, because opioid addiction is so far more dangerous than marijuana. I'm not gonna lie, I've been using marijuana since I was 14 years old and had PTSD back then. I just didn't know that I was self-medicating with what would eventually be my medication. Opioid addiction, I have suffered since I was 20 years old because I was in a massive car accident, killed my mother, and had a traumatic brain injury. And I have not experienced near as many close calls to death because of accidentally overdosing. I literally have a Narcan supply in my house for that reason. What do I have for marijuana? I mean, again, I come from the medical community and I don't find it nearly as dangerous as opioids, especially considering children are getting into them and they're being sold on the street. So just to briefly finish, I feel like marijuana is the most credible pain relief as far as providing relief without harmful side effects like you read on TV from all of these chemicals. And yes, THC is a chemical derived from a plant. From all these chemicals, though, that people are taking in chemical form and not naturally. That's why we have a cannabinoid system. So we're already set up for this. We're not set up for opioids. Our bodies don't know what to do with it, except, I now have an irregular heartbeat from it.
Thank you.
Opioids, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ciaretta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you
Next
again.
speaker would be Edward Salzman. Edward Salzman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, sweet. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for giving me the time to speak. It's definitely interesting hearing all these perspectives. So I just wanted to weigh in a little bit. So I'm actually in Oregon, but from the New Jersey and Pennsylvania area originally. And I moved out here to get into the cannabis industry because the East Coast cannabis industry back then was, just, it really wasn't existent. And now it's just so shut off to like the small entrepreneurs of the cannabis business. So that's kind of where my main focus is watching how New Jersey unfolds and what they're doing with micro licenses, which I think is pretty cool. But then also seeing as though, there's only going to be 37 cultivation licenses awarded, or so it seems. And, just knowing how many ATCs are already there and have probably, the first, they're first in line to get those. I'm just, I'm kind of in the same position, just, watching from the outside, waiting to see what the state is going to do so that, we can see about getting in and participating on a smaller level, because we're not a big, billion-dollar market cap cannabis business like Curaleaf, earlier on the call. And another thing that I think is really important to highlight is when we're talking about the caps. So like we have 5 licenses over here in Oregon. That's the only state that we're operational in right now. But then we do have 4 CBD stores in Pennsylvania under the brand Smooth Roots, where we sell a whole bunch of, really high quality CBD products, with the whole idea is to educate the customer on what these products are, how it's going to best work for them, and using that as a way to segue into the cannabis licensing in New Jersey and Pennsylvania as it comes along. And one thing that I think is pretty concerning is talking about caps on THC products and everything, and how other people brought up, how if somebody wants to ingest 500 milligrams, they're going to ingest 500 milligrams. They're going to do it. And instituting those kinds of caps just continually feeds the black market because of that reason. So those are just some big, areas of things that I'm watching for. And, just looking to see how the smaller people that don't have access to millions of dollars can participate in the new flood, or really kind of drowns the business is when is with the zoning. Because like one state, for instance, Massachusetts, a lot of their localities, they say, all right, you have like
Mr.
1 square
Salzman, you have
mile.
30 seconds.
All right. They say, they're like, you guys have 1 square mile of where you're allowed to be, and then you're only allowed to have 2 stores. And then in that place, there's, just the demand for the products is so significant to where the regulations kind of choke the market out, and then the patients and the customers aren't able to get what they're looking to get. And like my aunt in New Jersey, who has peripheral neuropathy right now, is experiencing that, because when she comes to visit me in Oregon, I'm able to supply her with stuff where she gets benefits from these products to where she's never gotten before. So she went and got a New Jersey medical card, and she asked me to bring stuff home with me because she can't get the products over there. And you never do anything like that, but it just begs the question as to like, if they're going to spend the money and participate in the program, how can we ensure that they're going to get what is actually going to be beneficial for them? And I think a lot of that
Thank you,
comes
Mr.
down to
Salzman.
the regulations behind the program. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Salzman. Any questions from the commissioners?
One quick question, Mr. Salzman, thank you very much for your remarks. Just want to ask, seems like you have some experience out in Oregon, and you are very concerned about the social equity components of the industry, making sure small businesses and the local prospective applicant that they have a fair shot at attaining a permanent license. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations based on your experience about what the CRC could do?
One huge component to like a barrier to entry, I think, is financial requirements. Like when I was looking at Pennsylvania and New Jersey for that matter, and I was a little bit more familiar with Pennsylvania, but like there's financial requirements to where if to even be applicable, you have to show that you have access to, like in Pennsylvania for cultivation, for instance, was like $2 million or something like that. And that was, it was for the medical side, but the point behind it is that the way that the regulations seem to be developed is that they just favor large corporations so much more than the smaller entrepreneurs. And to really have a thriving cannabis market, like a lot of earlier people were saying on this call, it's going to be in the smaller, more boutique, or just like the smaller businesses which are catering to specific markets. Like I'm currently at one of our dispensaries here in Lincoln City on the coast, and I can tell you from the other dispensary that we have in McMinnville, which is an hour away, there are different products that certain people over here on the coast like a lot more, and it just creates a much better free market environment than when the regulations try and dictate what people are allowed to get, which then puts people back onto the black market and then just kind of cuts the legs off the whole thing overall.
Very helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Salzman.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the time. I really like what you guys are doing, giving everybody the chance to speak. It's really cool to be able to be a part of it. And I hope that as we continue to grow, we can continue to grow over in New Jersey, where I'm from originally. That was my whole goal, was to come out here and learn over in Oregon, where I think it's being done very legitimately. And I think, as one thing I always try and think, I think to myself is like trying with the idea of like recreating the wheel. Like we can look to other states who have gone through the trials and tribulations of implementing a cannabis market. And like Oregon, for instance, has had ups and downs, significant swings. And, we can kind of see the regulatory framework here, what's now working. And, and it just is working for everybody. There's your large corporations, like you have Nectar, who has 47 retail licenses
Thank you,
across
Mr.
Oregon.
Salzman.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the time, but that was kind of my, where I was thinking with everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For
Feel
sure.
free to submit your comments in writing if you have any additional.
Yeah, I will. I will. Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
Any other questions from our commissioners? All right, hearing none, we'll move to our next speaker.
A reminder to everyone to make sure your first and last names are visible on your screen. You're listed with a first and last name as you registered. The next 5 are
Tony Ann, sorry, on that note, I see a Bob M and Eric Scarlet Reserve. We have an Eric Jang from Scarlet Reserve and a Bob Miller. So as Tony Ann was mentioning, you can change your name. We just need to know that you are, those people who signed up here. So, for Bob M, if you're Bob Miller, please just change your name to reflect Bob Miller, and likewise for Eric Jang. And thank you. Go ahead, Tony Ann.
I did send private messages to change the names, and I
did
never.
see that. Yep.
Okay. Tara Sargenti, Andrew George, Roland Pott, Dr. Monique Hamilton, and Robin Amjadi. Those are the next 5. Tara Sargenti, Andrew George, Roland Pott, Dr. Monique Hamilton, Robin Amjadi. I see Andrew George.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew George. I'm a student at law from Toronto, Ontario. I'm an Ianthus shareholder, and I'm here representing a group of shareholders also from New Jersey. A request has been made to approve the transfer of the MPX New Jersey license to Ianthus and approve a change of control in the Ianthus pursuant to a proposed restructuring. The New Jersey Administrative Code, Title 8, Chapter 264, Subchapter 7.1 requires that the department shall consider at a minimum a number of factors in reviewing the qualifications of principals, directors, board members, and owners applying to a transfer, including whether they have previously furnished false or fraudulent material in any application made in connection with a drug, manufacturing, or distribution, and this requirement is broadly interpreted to apply when a transferee provides false or fraudulent materials to any relevant regulatory or other public authority in any jurisdiction. So on behalf of the shareholders, and I'm for myself, we would like to refer to the department to the following facts. It was admitted that the CEO of Ianthus resigned after the principal of a debt provider, which is Gotham Green Partners, whom you are now being asked to approve as a controlling party, paid a bribe to the CEO. It was ruled on September 25, 2020, counsel for Ianthus represented to the British Columbia Supreme Court that the shareholders should have all the relevant information before them at the time of the September 14 vote on the restructuring. You are being asked to approve, and that there have been no material changes of which shareholders should be advised prior to their vote. Upon review of the lower court's decision, the British Columbia Court of Appeal concluded that the Chambers judge had made an error in finding that Ianthus has made an undisclosed material change from its Q1 financial statements, and that the counsel for Ianthus had misrepresented the September press release to the court and to the shareholders and to the public market. It was ruled in Nevada, which is the Cannabis Control Board, that Ianthus had violated the Nevada DNAC 453D.315 and 453D.905, subsection 3B and subsection 4. In the January 26th meeting, the CCB decided to refer the transfer request back to the staff for further review for issuance and determines in consultation with Ianthus and its counsel whether the matter could be resolved via stipulated settlements. They agreed to paying a $10,000 penalty, which was in violation of the code. And as a result, there was a disciplinary action complaint, and it's proceeding to disciplinary hearing, which is a Category 1 violation. A complaint has been filed with the Nevada Attorney General and the NCCB regarding a second Category 1 violation that on September 4, 2020, Ianthus misrepresented to the regulator who the Green Mart Nevada CEO. My apologies. My Ianthus represented to the regulator who the Green Mart Nevada CEO was. The New Jersey license was issued to MPX New Jersey on the basis that it was a license controlled by an all-female operator and not an all largely male white Wall Street corporation. We asked
Mr. George, you have 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. We asked that the department carefully consider the qualifications of both Gotham Green, Ianthus, and the transferees as per the New Jersey Administrative Code, Title 8, Chapter 64, Subchapter 7.1. While we appreciate the Ianthus may be pressuring the department for approval before the plan of arrangement deadline of June 30, which is somewhat true, we would also like to point out that on June 30th, the plan of arrangement agreement can be extended by consent of the initial debt providers, who are the main beneficiaries of the plan of arrangement. So therefore, there is no real deadline for them because they could always extend it. Now, the purpose behind this is that the beneficiaries of the plan of arrangement will be given 97.25%, which wipes out the shareholder value of the company and also dilutes the share count to 6 billion shares, which is currently trading at 20 cents. So therefore, we just like to let you know that the deadline should therefore not be considered, that it's a real deadline, and that you should take your time and carefully investigate the violations they've made and also any cross ownership in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. The commission will, as always, take appropriate steps on any matters that are before it. So thank you for your time and your comments. Next speaker.
The next person up will be Roland Pott.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Roland Pott. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. Thank you for all your work in listening to members of the public and particularly to the small business owners. I'm a small business owner based here in Trenton, New Jersey, and been working here for about 25 years. And I'm a real estate owner, got my start with a restaurant, and I've throughout my career tried to work very closely with entrepreneurs, particularly signing leases and working with small business owners that might not potentially get the opportunity to lease a space in certain markets, but because of the size of their capitalization or their credit. And so I'm really excited about the legislation that you're considering and the regulations that you're doing. And I also serve as the chairman of the Trenton Downtown Association board. And our downtown in Trenton has struggled, particularly over the years, with our retailers being dependent on state government employees who generally only shop, during the day, kind of 9 to 5, and don't always stay in the downtown to support the small businesses, the small retailers in particular, after 5. I say this to emphasize that we should be as not restrictive in the zoning, and we should really allow as many licenses as possible and see how this goes. For downtown Trenton, this is going to be a way for new revenue to support small business owners that have been stretched very thin over the years. And I think to some extent I speak for older downtowns throughout the state and Main Street districts throughout the state, which have struggled with disinvestment as retail has moved out onto the Route 1s of the state and the main highways, which have been overzoned for retail. So I really encourage you to let these licenses grow, let this support the small businesses in the state, particularly the retailers in the older downtown areas, and let the towns set their rules and try not to limit it as much as you can. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pott. Any questions from the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Mr. Pott.
Thank you.
The next speaker up will be Dr. Monique Hamilton.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm Dr. Monique Hamilton, and I'm the lead physician for the Dr. Monihammy Medical Center, DMMC, in South Orange, New Jersey. Visit us at drmonihammy.com. I'm registered with the New Jersey Medical Marijuana Program, and I provide patients with medical marijuana certs for the management of qualifying conditions in addition to lifestyle mods to change lifestyle habits. The DMMC, other medical practitioners, business development professionals, and social justice advocates are presenting the New Jersey Cannabis Virtual Roundtable, hashtag NJCVRT, on June 4th. During the NJCVRT, we'll be discussing patient care, health and wellness, business development, and social justice and equity as it relates to cannabis. In response to the recent question the CRC posed, what non-oil-based concentrates and edible products would make medical cannabis easier to take, more effective, and more accessible, and should similar products be available to recreational users, and how would new product types, particularly those with high potency, impact public health and safety? I would like to answer that question like this. The type of cannabis product a patient uses is dependent upon the patient's response to the cannabis product and what condition the cannabis is being used for. A bona fide doctor-patient relationship is essential to determine which products work best for that patient. The patient should consult with a medical marijuana program physician to determine what is the treatment goal so a plan of care can be developed. This is why bona fide doctor-patient relationships are important. As with conventional therapies, the patient may have to try different forms of cannabis to see which one is the best at helping the patient reach the treatment goal. The patient should be able to choose from a variety of cannabis products so the doctor and patient can determine what is right for that individual. There are many conventional medications such as opiates like OxyContin and benzodiazepines like Xanax, in which overdose can be lethal. These prescribed medications have a significant impact on public health and safety since it can be accessible to children if not properly packaged and stored. However, cannabis is not lethal, even in high doses. The same measures to ensure the safe packaging and storage of prescribed medications like OxyContin or Xanax can be applied to cannabis products as well. For decades, minorities have suffered inequality as it pertains to the criminal justice system, financial system, and health system. I applaud the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission and its efforts to develop and enforce programs and regulations for the New Jersey cannabis industry that incorporates social justice and equity. It is imperative that social equity also be applied to medical marijuana. As a physician, I have witnessed the impact of healthcare inequality in patients from disadvantaged communities. There have been times when patients can't afford to pay for important medication monthly and as a result don't take the medication as prescribed. These difficult decisions often result in substandard care, which prevents the patient from having adequate control of chronic conditions. Disadvantaged patients who may benefit from medical marijuana may have difficulty affording it and maintain adequate follow-up with the New Jersey Medical Marijuana Program physician, diminishing the bona fide doctor-patient relationship. It would be helpful if there were a subsidy program available for disadvantaged patients. This will help with making medical marijuana more accessible to New Jersey residents who have had difficulty reaching treatment goals with conventional therapies.
Dr. Hamilton, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. We will expand upon this topic and others at our New Jersey Cannabis Virtual Roundtable on June 4th. RSVP for the event at drmonihami.com. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. Any questions from the commissioners for Dr. Hamilton? Hearing none, I will thank you again, Dr. Hamilton, for your time and your comments this afternoon.
The next speaker will be Eric Zhang.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Zhang. I'm the owner of Scarlet Reserve. We're a licensed New Jersey CBD processor and retailer looking to apply for a microbusiness like many others before. First off, whoever thought of this town hall style approach is an absolute genius. Thank you, commission chairs, for taking the time to listen to the people of our dear Garden State. As Mr. Barker asked about earlier for improvements of micro license regulations, I'd like to address the topic of micro license township zone requirements and its negative impact on limiting employment and disadvantaging smaller urban boroughs. Like Evan and many others here listening, I've sacrificed everything. I've given up my engineering career. I bet my entire future to start up our CBD ventures. All this just so we can have a slim chance at a real THC micro license. And yes, I'm extremely grateful to the commission and to the state lawmakers for even considering micro licenses. All the requirements are perfect. However, there is some concern in the residency town zoning rule, which requires 51% or more of staff to reside in the township or bordering. In such an unknown taboo industry, finding an affordable warehouse in one's hometown with a 420 landlord 420 friendly landlord is practically impossible. I personally spent over a year and was rejected countless of times by landlords and municipalities deathly scared of us for even just mentioning the word hemp. That's not even the real THC cannabis. Finally, we found our facility 30 minutes west in the middle of nowhere, and now I'm forced to move out there just to meet the micro license requirement. Personally, I'm already planning my move away from my friends, from my family, to live in our facilities township. Like I said, I'm willing to give up everything, my entire life, just for a shot, a maybe at a micro license. One heck of a gamble, huh? Anyways, I signed up for this, but many of my New Jersey neighbors won't have the means to do so. It especially disadvantages the smaller boroughs. For example, Metuchen. It's surrounded by Edison. Thus, its residents or micro facilities are limited to employment in Edison. They won't be able to hire, reside, or work in Woodbridge or South Plainfield, despite being 5 minutes away. Vice versa, too. Woodbridge won't be able to hire, reside, or work in Metuchen. There's dozens of other similar cases. For example, in a more clustered urban area like Camden, they can't work 10 minutes away in Belmar if there was a micro facility there. Belmar famous for Curaleaf. And the only reason is because it's not a bordering town. I plead for you to put some consideration in updating this requirement. An ideal solution would be allowing 2 municipalities over instead of just the one bordering. Other solutions may be a 10-mile radius or a county restriction. But please, the current township zone requirement greatly inhibits employment and unfairly handicaps
Mr.
smaller
Zhang, you have
urban-
30 seconds.
Okay. It unfairly handicaps smaller urban boroughs. To conclude, I would love to hear your thoughts on micro license restrictions. And again, thank you, Commission, for considering the smaller voices of our garden state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Any questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you again, Mr. Zhang, for your time.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to jump in with a quick clarification. So what Mr. Zhang was speaking about is our statutory restrictions on micro businesses. They're not a requirement that the commission has put in place, but it's one that we'll have to navigate. So, appreciate the feedback. But, as we've talked about before, there are some things in statute and, we'll have to navigate around those or work with those as best we can.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang.
On the chance that Bob M is Robert Miller, I'm going to allow that person to speak, but you will have to clarify for the record your name.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, this is Bob Bem, which is the same as Robert Miller. So sorry for that confusion. It's one and the same person. Thank you. So thank you for the commission to allow me to give you some thoughts. My background's a little bit different. I'm the COO of ACT Laboratories, so we're a testing laboratory. And a little bit about my background. Born and raised in New Jersey, have a bachelor's degree in pharmacy and a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from Rutgers. And previous to joining ACT Laboratories, was the head of quality at Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and senior vice president at Gilead. I joined ACT Laboratories about 18 months ago, and my real strong desire is taking my over 35 years of experience in quality and applying those standards that I've learned through the pharmaceutical business and applying those to the cannabis business. And as you know, with the strong history that we have in New Jersey, being the centerpiece, at least historically, of the pharmaceutical business, I see a really great opportunity. A little bit about ACT Laboratories. We're actively licensed in 5 specific states: Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, and Illinois. And we're actively getting licensure also in California and Massachusetts. We've got a lot of experience working with regulators, particularly in startup modes, and have really been able to grow with those regulators as they develop their programs. With that being said, we've seen some really great, highly compliant programs, compliance being a special place in my heart. Michigan being one of those states. They actually indicate themselves that they want to have pharmaceutical standards. And I think in hearing what we want to do in the state of New Jersey, some really great opportunities and learnings there. In our world of ACT Laboratories, we try to take the best of the best. As we learn in our various states, we then apply those standards to other states to really develop a very high quality and compliant program. And our goal really is to ensure accurate and reliable results to ensure patient safety. And that's very much what keeps me going in our operation going moving forward. What have we learned in our experiences and how does it apply to New Jersey? I know there's been a lot of conversations about edible, high potency products, even some conversations of things like beverages. Some of those are extremely complicated analytically, being able to test them and do them in a reliable fashion. And when you kind of go back to what we do, really making sure that what's on the label is really in the product, they present some challenges, but at the same time, they're quite doable. But we need to apply some of the pharmaceutical experiences also. How do you validate a product? Making sure that every dosage form has the same as the next one, particularly when we're dealing edible products. We also are very supportive of the idea about testing every batch. Every batch needs to be tested to ensure that, again, what the patient is getting is what's expected. I know there was some mention earlier about reliability of data and some of the regulations. And one of the things we've seen is some really good laboratories and there's some that are not so good. And we think to make it to be a highly reliable and to instill patient confidence in the reliability, particularly we talk a lot about labeling and what's on the label, being able to have blinded studies whereby the state would send out samples. So I applaud the state of saying we're going to take some of those to your laboratories. I really would suggest you to continue to do that because that just makes perfect sense moving forward. There was mentioned before also about some of the challenge, what we see in other states. Potency is key. We've heard a lot about high potency products and potency is key. Making sure
Mr. Miller, you have 30 seconds.
There are some specific standards in order to ensure reliable data for potency. And the other one is microbiology. You can do very different types of tests and get very different results. So some standardization becomes really key to ensure reliable results. So in summary, and then one other I should mention is expiration dating or use by date. When you start to get into things like beverages, they will degrade over time. And what may have started on the label will not be on the label by the time the patient may get it. So ensuring we have expiration dating. So in summary, really because of our ties, the strong pharmaceutical background, and the whole idea of ensuring that we're ensuring patient safety, really looking forward for ACT Laboratories and myself to work with you to define, implement, and ensuring compliant program, and at the same time developing meaningful specifications and methodologies to, again, to ensure overall product and public safety. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Miller? Hearing none, thank you again, Mr. Miller, for your time this evening.
The next, well, this is a last call for Tara Sargenti or Robin Amjadi. Okay, the next five are Kyle Albanese, John Song, Levi A. Holmes II, Carlos J., and Jack Weldon. Jack J. will need to provide his full name if he's present. Again, the names are Kyle Albanese, John Song, Levi A. Holmes II, Carlos J., and Jack Weldon. Of those names, I'm not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to read the next five. Dr. Jan Shilpsky, Percival Wilmot, Lawrence Barnes Esquire, Thomas Howard, and Michael Terranova. Dr. Jan Shapelsky, Percival Wilmot, Lawrence Barnes Esquire, Thomas Howard, and Michael Terranova. I see Jan Shapelsky, and I will allow him to speak first.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Dr. Jan Shapelsky on behalf of New Jersey Cannalytics, an independent testing lab preparing to serve medical patients and recreational consumers of New Jersey. We are grateful for the hard work you are doing in moving the industry forward, promoting thoughtful discussion, and supporting public safety and social equity. Independent laboratory safety testing is crucial and often overlooked component of the medical industry. Testing minimizes patient and consumer exposure to harmful pesticides, microbes, heavy metals, toxins, residual solvents, and so on, which is especially important in the immunocompromised populations. The analysis of cannabinoid profiles provides consumers the ability to determine appropriate dosing for individual use. Private independent testing also reduces the burden on the state to service large-scale licensees that are dependent on affordable and timely testing. Lastly, laboratory testing promotes integrity and trust within the cannabis industry and enhances public safety. We encourage the CRC to allow processors to produce edibles, tinctures, topicals, sublinguals, beverages, and any other delivery systems that patients and consumers are most comfortable using. Cannabis products that are safe enough for patients to consume are generally safe for adult use, and the CRC should avoid setting potency limits since patients use cannabinoid levels results to modulate their intake. Keeping action levels identical for medical and recreational products simplifies the regulatory burden for the CRC, but some states do allow for higher action limits for recreational products. New Jersey Cannalytics is capable and ready to test whichever products the CRC makes available and the people of New Jersey choose to consume. We applaud the CRC for adopting interim standards for laboratory testing for medical cannabis in New Jersey. We would like to reinforce the comments on April 22nd, urging the CRC to establish a scientific advisory board or work group to support the CRC with scientific input on testing standards. Based on regulations adopted in almost all medical and adult use markets, we would highly encourage the CRC to prohibit cross ownership between laboratories and growers, processors, or dispensaries. Prohibiting laboratories from having direct or indirect financial interests in a grower, processor, or other ancillary business is critical in maintaining the integrity of the industry and public health of citizens of New Jersey. Additionally, we encourage the CRC to require regular inter-laboratory evaluations to ensure that results produced by any individual laboratory are robust and reproducible, minimizing problems seen in other labs, like in other states, like dry labbing, lab shopping, and potency inflation. Independent lab testing helps ensure that quality medicine is consumed by patients and the public in general. New Jersey Cannalytics is excited to work towards the goals of enhancing public health, patient safety, and we're committed to building trust in the New Jersey cannabis industry. Thank you very much for your hard work and for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shapelsky. Dr. Shapelsky, my apologies. Any questions from the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Dr. Shapelsky.
Next up will be Carlos Jara.
Hi, guys. Good day.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Good afternoon. Sorry. I'm a licensed producer in another entity in another region, and I'm also an allied health professional. Lived and works in New Jersey for over 15 years. And it was kind of interesting when I started joining these calls because, again, I've gone through the process in another jurisdiction from license application, pre-licensing, setting up a cultivation site, setting up a retail site, and I've gone through the whole gamut. And just hearing the different views from every walk of life, from every individual on this call, over the past month or so, is very interesting. And it really comes back down to, how do we get everyone involved from, the minority owners, Black and brown businesses. Of course, you need large companies to make the industry thrive and probably giddy up. But the main focus for me really was how do we get our minority individuals who have been disenfranchised, another name for them, or grassroots people. And, some of the conversations that were given, micro license, certain amount of percentage to micro licenses. And one of the main concerns I have with that, because again, I've experienced it in an international jurisdiction, and what will happen, the big boys, as we like to call them, will come in and sweep and merge with, minority companies or buy 51% of the company and buy out, small owners. So how do we achieve social interest and social equity at the same time as the big guys or lead in the pack? So one thought that I had, as I went through, the whole process was, why don't we have, create some kind of relationship where big companies kind of sponsor a minority or woman-owned businesses. At the same time, they're reporting and building their businesses. We as individuals, as disenfranchised, grassroots people can be doing the same things, as reported numbers at the same time as the big guys, because all over the market or the industry since its inception, we've heard of big numbers from, the big time producers, the Wall Street guys, and you haven't heard a minority or a small business owned company reaping the rewards simultaneously. So it has to be something where the commission looks at, different zoning areas Are we allowing too many of these big companies to dominate in one area? Are we not allowing minorities or the micro businesses, individuals to stay to one area and be successful as the big guys because of the money and everything they have, you know, the organization, the legal team, to be successful? So it has to be a matter of how are we grading the micro business and how are we initiating the license for the micro businesses to be competitive simultaneously as the big companies are. Because it's going to be a case where we'll see this again. And we have to take our hats off to New Jersey, of course, who seems to be very serious about the micro business opportunities and can be a leader here nationally and probably even globally to say, hey, we're not leaving anyone out, because, you know, we know this is important for people's families, people's, you know, education, people's health. And again, speaking from an allied health point of view, I work, you know, again, as a licensed allied health professional in New Jersey, and I've seen and heard colleagues, patients love this industry, can't get into this industry, love the medicine that they're getting, can't get enough of it because of the limited access. And again, it's going to come down to how we as New Jersey residents, New Jersey business people.
Mr. Jara, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, ma'am. How do we simultaneously make, you know, big guys benefit, small companies benefit, the community benefit? And we could advertise like we do in election time, you know, a new cannabis venture in your town, in Patterson, where we're looking, in Newark, in East Orange, because if we don't get involved early in these minority owned or controlled towns, it's going to be left behind like we've seen in, you know, in past jurisdictions. So yeah, I'm very interested again, you know, in sharing my thought, because I've been through the process and experiences and comments and just, you know, fighting with the big guys to show that, hey, grassroots people do have a place in the industry, and we can do it, you know, collectively together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jara. Any questions?
Quick question for Mr. Jara, and if it helps in the interest of time, if you want to just submit your answer in writing, I'm happy for that. Just based on your experience, I know you alluded to, like, you kind of buried it, you didn't want to share with us, but you alluded to having experience in another region. Just want to know, as you seem very committed to social equity and ensuring that there's a complete ecosystem and a level playing field, can you share some best practices from the region that you set up a cultivation and dispensary, and some of the worst practices, some of the things that you think they're not doing right, and some of the things you think that they are doing right, so that we can take that into consideration?
For sure. And I'll be also willing to share this information offline as well, Commissioner Baker, because I think it's very important. You know, again, I took investors here from the US into this international jurisdiction. And one of the hardest things that made it a challenge for small business to survive was that you create the same kind of requirements for the small business or micro business as you did for the big businesses. So how can a guy with $500 compare with a guy with $500,000 in his bank account and ongoing investors, you know, willing to side with the guy because of whatever reason, he has more experience or whatever race he's from? So you cannot have the same requirements as far as fencing and cameras and you know, the amount of property that you need to get a license compared to the big guy. Because I've watched the big guy came into this jurisdiction, hired 20 people and knocked everything down and got the job done in 10 days, while it took me 100 days to get that same amount of work done. So the requirements cannot be similar. There has to be some adjustments in the way we say we're going to require a micro business to have the same licenses as a large corporation, because it's just not going to be the same way that you're going to get over these humps. So some kind of tweak in the requirements, not to say we're going to skip the seriousness of this business, but there has to be less restrictions, for lack of a better word, on these micro businesses, with the help probably of the large corporation or as a sister company to say, you know, to make sure we are successful.
Thank you very much, Mr. John.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Jara, for your time and your remarks this evening.
The next 5 will be John Freeman, Joe Schuster, Joe Johnson, Chirali Patel, and Lonnie Ephraim. John Freeman, Joe Schuster, Joe Johnson, Chirali Patel, and Lonnie Ephraim. I see Joe Johnson. I will allow him to speak. You may go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, members of the commission, for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Joe Johnson, and I am a policy legal fellow with the ACLU of New Jersey. We shared many of our recommendations as they relate to equity with the CRC at the last meeting, but we do believe that there's also a role for municipalities to play here, as the legislature grants them rather broad authority in this space. We respect the right of municipalities to opt out of cannabis establishments. However, we are more interested in ensuring the municipalities that plan to opt in take the proper steps to protect their local industry from being run by large multi-state operators and instead incentivize small local businesses. And there are a few ways for an interested municipality to do so. The first component is ensuring that the local regulations around licensing are not too restrictive as to prove cost prohibitive for smaller local entrepreneurs. One example that illustrates that potential harm is the recent ordinance passed by Bayonne, which allows for only a handful of cannabis establishments and calls for large non-refundable application fees and annual licensing fees that can go up to $40,000 for specific class types. We fear that ordinances like the one passed in Bayonne will not foster equity or local participation in the industry and instead have the opposite effect. Municipalities should create licensing standards that allow for proper control over the market and cover the administrative expenses associated with it. Any additional required monies undercut the spirit and emergence of equity in the industry. Secondly, we strongly recommend that municipalities who are interested in building an equitable local industry implement the 2% tax at all levels allowed by statute and invest that revenue in the creation of local equity programs that help local entrepreneurs, especially from communities that have been most harmed by the criminalization of cannabis. Based on our research of cannabis industries and equity programs across the country, there will not be equity in the market unless the government is intentional about building it in and investing in it. Localities such as Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and numerous more have implemented such programming and have seen success. Some of the ideas that have proven fruitful elsewhere are providing financial, legal, and technical business assistance, workforce development programs, and even municipal aided property purchasing programs. This is an area where municipalities can really be creative and create programming that will truly build up a locally led industry that helps local economies and residents thrive. It's also important to note that impact zones specifically will be eligible to receive additional state revenue down the line that is earmarked for community reinvestment and potentially for further investment into their cannabis equity programming. Now, there's also a role for the CRC to play here as well. We believe that municipalities would be more likely to implement local equity programs if they knew that the CRC would then fight for additional funding for municipalities that have created such programming. Additionally, municipalities, as we've heard today, would definitely benefit from clear guidance from the CRC that delineates both parties' roles in the licensing process. Finally, I would just like to say to all of the municipal reps that are still on this call and are interested in building out local equity programming, please reach out to myself or my colleagues at the ACLU of New Jersey. We're currently working on a model ordinance for municipalities to enact that would implement the 2% tax and create equity programming, and would love to partner with anyone who is interested. That's all that I have today. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have to the best of my ability.
Johnson, any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And if you may, when that model ordinance is ready, please feel free to share that with the commission.
Absolutely.
Mr. Johnson, I would highly recommend that you share that model ordinance, if you haven't done it already, with the League of Municipalities so they can get it out globally to their members.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Commissioner Delgado.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you again, Mr. Johnson, for your time and your remarks this evening.
Next up will be Chirali Patel.
Thank you, CRC, for taking the time to listen and allowing us this time to speak. My name is Shirali Patel. I'm an attorney in the state, founder of Blaze Responsibly, and I'm testifying today in my personal capacity as a legally registered medical cannabis patient. I'd like to comment solely on the second issue the CRC raised with respect to concentrates and edible cannabis products and protecting patient access during the rollout of the adult use market. Patients need access to edible products, concentrates, non-oil-based concentrates such as shatter, and products such as transdermal patches. My aunt lost her battle to metastatic adenolung carcinoma, a rare type of cancer which spread to her bones and brain. She couldn't consume the traditional ways via inhaling flower or vapor due to the lung cancer. So back in 2019, there were no medical products in New Jersey that she could use as palliative care. She needed body oil to massage her bones after rounds of radiation, and edibles to give her cravings, and transdermal patches to control the pain. Instead, she had to deal with fentanyl patches that made her throw up, and Oxycontin, which made her comatose. Patients deserve better access to product offerings and the ability to choose what works best for their conditions. Products can offer potency ranges so that patients can select based on their level of pain or specific concerns on any given day. As I walk into medical dispensaries today in New Jersey, I'm left wondering, why are ATCs designed to cater to adult use customers already? Patients don't need packaging with cartoons or long lines or bud tenders who can't answer questions about which strains are better for sleep versus daytime. Patients need medical products that come equipped with information about dosage, use, and warnings as applicable. As the CRC contemplates the future of the medical program, please keep the patients in mind and don't allow the program to falter, as it has been the case in numerous other legalized states. The CRC asked about high potency and how that would impact public health and safety. So I just wanted to quickly address that it's no different than allowing high proof alcohol. As a society, we need to recognize that bad actors exist and we can't control bad behavior. We can only limit it and the exposure. The CRC can inform consumers and patients about high potency products, create warning labels, awareness campaigns, just educate the consumer in general so we're equipped with information to make better decisions. Also, how is high potency defined? Because a high THC percentage doesn't necessarily mean it's potent. Things like terpenes, flavonoids play a role in the entourage effect, which determines ultimately the level intensity of a high. Another thing to contemplate is, creating two separate menus of product offerings for medical versus
Ms.
adult use
Patel, you have
consumers.
30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Products within the medical category itself can be divided to meet the needs of patients. For example, patients who are terminally ill with 12 months or less left to live should have access to higher potency transdermal patches and edibles versus patients suffering from anxiety who may not need the patches, but instead may need lower grade patches, etc. For the sake of time, on behalf of all patients who agree with my position, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patel. Quick clarification question for you. You mentioned some of the workers in existing ATCs. I believe you said that you found them to be undereducated. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, if you will, without naming specific individuals or ATCs?
Absolutely. Without naming them, I'll give you an example. I was at a newly opened dispensary recently this past weekend, and I just asked a simple question, which was, do you recommend a strain for, for sleeping versus daytime? Because I noticed that there's no information on the labels about, whether this is a couch high, for example, or if it's something that I can take for, just the insomnia. And the individual just said, I'm new here and we don't get training on this. And that was the end of that conversation. That's concerning to say, at a corporate level, not to be receiving training. So I think there needs to be some sort of mandate that the ATCs are providing bud tenders training, because it's not their fault if they're not equipped. It's the responsibility of the corporation. That's just a quick example.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners for Ms. Patel? Hearing none, thank you again, Ms. Patel, for your time and your remarks this evening.
Thank you.
The next 5 up are Alan Au, Linda Bush, Somac, Tracy A. Buckley, Joe Hubler, and Scott T. Machio. Alan Au is already up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Alan Au. Last name is spelled A-O. I'm a registered pharmacist as well as a lifelong New Jersey native. Thank you so much to the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission for opening the dialogue to the public to gain the perspective of the people. A little background about myself. I spent 2.5 years serving as vice president and clinical pharmacist in one of New Jersey's ATCs. I'm currently an active board member of the International Society of Cannabis Pharmacists, as well as founder and president of a consulting service called Plants and Prescriptions, highlighting the intersection of cannabis and modern day healthcare. I'd like to give a little insight about cannabis products based on first-hand experience working directly with patients of the NJMMP. Quick science lesson: traditional cannabinoids like THC and CBD exhibit what's known as the biphasic dose response, meaning at some point increasing the dose will not increase effectiveness. If you visualize a standard bell curve, sitting on the top would be what they call the sweet spot, where the effective dose is. Increasing the dosage beyond that point will not add increased benefits. The problem arises that this sweet spot is unique to every patient. Cannabis use as medicine is a highly individualized process rooted in self-discovery of what product, strength, and effective in treating a patient-specific medical condition. I've serviced patients using 2.5 milligrams of THC orally, as well as patients consuming 150 milligrams of THC via inhalation as their respective baseline doses. Both of them have a qualifying condition of chronic pain. If you'd like to know more about this topic, please visit my blog at plantsandprescriptions.com. From a public health perspective, my opinion is that restricting product access or potencies won't necessarily correlate with increased public health safety. Efforts should instead be focused on ensuring processors and manufacturers produce standardized, uniform labels, prominently displaying both active and inert ingredients, concentrations and potencies, and clear serving sizes. I believe having a centralized database where the public can access this information would be a great resource in building consumer confidence. To avoid potential issues with minors, packaging should be child resistant and avoid imagery that might seemingly be attractive to that population. Lastly, dispensary staff should be required to undergo baseline training, highlighting the importance of patient education, responsible cannabis consumption, as well as the technical ability to interpret and translate those package labels into recommendations for their patients. In regards to other dosage form, prioritizing cost to patient is essential, considering third-party reimbursements are not readily available. Allowing concentrated forms of cannabinoids will benefit patients requiring higher amounts of THC. Setting potency caps will require these patients to purchase more of the same product to obtain the same specific effective dose. As a healthcare provider, inhalation via combustion is never—
Dr. Au, you have 30 seconds.
As a healthcare provider, inhalation via combustion is never the preferred route of administration. I advocate for having a wide range of non-inhaled products such as oral sprays, suppositories, patches, edibles, topical products, as well as some variations of edibles, including sugar-free, gluten-free, and even dye-free for the minor populations. Thank you so much for hearing my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Au. Do we have any questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you again. We'll go to the next speaker.
The next person up would be Scott Michio.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Do you have me?
Yes, you're ready to go.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, committee members, and Executive Director Brown. My name is Scott Michio with the law firm of Parker McKay. We represent a number of municipalities and land use boards across central and southern New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to attend several municipal meetings to explain the considerations that governing bodies must account for to ensure they're in compliance with the August 21st deadline to adopt an ordinance that addresses the 6 cannabis license classes. Along the way, I have discovered, with the help of governing body members and members of the public, some issues on which the legislation is silent and which will hopefully be addressed by the CRC's regulations. I'm a Jeopardy fan, so I phrase my comments in the form of a question. I'll list them off, and then I'm happy to add further context if necessary. Thank you all in advance for your consideration. Number 1, I understand that the SADC previously indicated that medical cannabis may be cultivated on preserved farmland. Will this also be the case for recreational cannabis? Number 2, what are the implications of the Right to Farm Act? May cannabis cultivators avail themselves of the protections of the Right to Farm Act, such as protection from certain nuisance lawsuits and local regulations? The Right to Farm Act has been interpreted so as to not require site plan review when certain agriculture-related structures are constructed on farms. Will this standard apply to cannabis cultivators as well? And lastly, number 3, my understanding is that under the law, with regard to alternative treatment centers, the municipality must expressly permit ATCs to participate in recreational cannabis activities. But this has been a topic of debate. I'm hoping this can be confirmed in the regulations. So those are the points I wanted to make, and I truly appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michio. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You got it.
Great. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Hearing none, thanks again. And we'll move to the next speaker.
Okay, we will move to the next block, Shaya Brock Chandel, whose name came up before, but is listed again. Chris Chiapata, Zachary Wyndham, Shannon Huffman, Adam Umansky, and Michael A. Huffman, Esquire. The Shaya Broadchandel, Chris Chiapata, Zachary Wyndham, Shannon Huffman, Adam Umansky, and Michael Huffman. I see Michael Huffman ready to go. You may go, Mr. Huffman.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Chairwoman Waynow and members of the CRC. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And as Chairwoman Waynow mentioned, I will try to be respectful, but as an attorney, I find it difficult to be concise. So I'll do my best. One of the things that I think I can echo among the previous multitude of speakers is that with regard to the municipal ordinance issues and with regard to municipal zoning issues, the biggest thing that we need is clarity, innovation, and education. In many different contexts, education is considered and called a silver bullet, and this is no exception. Specifically, in this context, I've submitted several comments with regard to ways that clarity and education could be offered to the municipalities. But here I would specifically bring up one issue and jump off of one area that the ACLU recently brought up in their commentary. And that is, we're going to be comparing municipalities to each other. How can a municipality know if it's in an impact zone? I read page 5 of the legislation, and specifically impact zones are generally defined as based on past criminal marijuana enterprises contributing to a higher concentration of law enforcement activity, unemployment, or poverty. That sounds like a good idea, but then when you get into the specifics, I ran into a wall. I can get the population and I can calculate the population of all the municipalities. I can get the unemployment numbers. I can calculate those for the municipalities. I can get the county types. What is important and where things come to a head on an impact zone is those questions with regard to criminal statistics, because that is where the war on drugs and the war on people was fought, is with those arrest numbers. The problem is they're based on the crime index and the possession arrests for not the municipality, but for the arresting agency. I want to say that again for clarity, just so that you understand that. The numbers that are submitted by the state police to the FBI and that are available publicly and were referred to in the statute do not refer to municipalities. They only refer to arresting agencies. So therefore, in a city like mine, like Vineland, which is served by a local police force, there were 214 arrests. There were also 399 arrests in Cumberland County by the state police. How many of those 399 by the state police are apportionable to Vineland? There's no way for us to know. That information is not publicly available and is not privately available.
I'm sorry, Mr. Huffman, you are out of time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I ask you to refer to my written comments, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Do we have any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Huffman?
Mr. Huffman, you say you were going to submit your remarks in the interest of time?
I had previously submitted them this morning. If you wish some clarification, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Commissioner Barker, you were muted there for a second.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Next up will be Zachary Wyndham. Zachary, you may go ahead.
Hello, thank you. My name is Zachary Wyndham. I am an attorney with the Cannabis Law Practice Group at Ansel, Grimm, and Aaron. My comments today are solely based on my own views. They do not reflect the views of my law firm or the clients of the firm. So restricting the types of delivery methods and products in the cannabis industry is not a net positive for the people of New Jersey. It primarily benefits two groups at the expense of everyone else's health and safety. It is also counterproductive to the stated social equity goals of this commission and of CREMA. First, restricting the types of products available to medical and adult use cannabis consumers props up participants in the unregulated market and discourages an attempt to transition to the regulated market. As long as people are unable to access certain delivery methods through a licensed facility, the only option will be to acquire those products from an unregulated provider. It is unreasonable to expect that those people will purchase permitted products from a licensed facility and only turn to unregulated sources for products they cannot get from licensed businesses. The path of least resistance for a consumer, or from a consumer standpoint, would be to purchase all of their cannabis products from the unregulated supplier who can provide them with a wider variety of product types. The major public health benefit of a regulated adult use cannabis market is the ability to protect the public from those who would put profit over people through the use of dangerous pesticides, adulterants, and ingredients in the production of their cannabis and cannabis items. Think of the 2019 vaping crisis when unregulated suppliers were using vitamin E acetate in vapor cartridges sold on the street and internet. By prohibiting certain types of products, you will endanger the members of the public who deserve to have confidence that what they are consuming is as safe as it can possibly be. The second group benefiting from restricting the types of products available are the existing vertically integrated alternative treatment centers. It is difficult to manufacture a cannabis-infused product well. It is even more difficult to manufacture a variety of cannabis-infused products well. I believe there was comments earlier about how there's only one provider of lozenges. Anyway, the fewer product types that are available means that there are fewer opportunities for new market participants before there is an oversaturation of licensees. Any oversaturation in the market is first going to impact micro business licensees. Therefore, prohibitions on specific product types will primarily harm small businesses owned and operated by New Jersey residents. A wide variety of permitted product types provides micro businesses with more opportunities to find their own niche within the industry. Supporting micro business licensees is critical to achieving the social equity goals outlined in CREMA and ensuring that New Jersey is not dominated by multi-state operators that are headquartered elsewhere. You have the power to dictate labeling and packaging requirements for any product types allowed. The notion that the existence of a particular product type in a well-regulated market is a threat to public health and safety is fundamentally false. Unregulated providers are a threat to public health and safety. Home extractions performed by consumers to create homemade versions of a product that they can't buy themselves is a threat to public health and safety.
Mr. Wyndham, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Prohibiting a specific product type instead of providing comprehensive regulations that allow it to be produced and sold in a trusted manner is a threat to public health and safety. Cannabis policy has been guided by fear and misunderstanding for long enough.
Questions for Mr. Wyndham?
And I would encourage you to look to Colorado and Oregon for examples of a well-regulated market.
Hearing none. Thank you again, Mr. Wyndham.
Thank you.
Next up would be Adam Umansky.
Hello, yes, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Hi. So I'd like to be brief. And I brought up similar, and again, thank you for the opportunity to take the time and be heard. I brought this up, or similar concerns up, at the last meeting. And my concerns specifically deal with the use of cannabis for religious purposes. And I asked a version of this question at the last meeting, but it is relevant specifically in the context of asking about concentrates and products like that and the limits on THC. There are several religions, including Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and Rastafarianism, that utilize cannabis for genuine and bona fide, sincere religious purposes. Now that cannabis is legal for adults to use for recreational purposes, it stands to reason that it's certainly legal for adults to use for religious purposes. The specific details, I guess, it becomes relevant in wondering about how these bona fide religions are to operate, their congregations between, informally, like at their homes, and more formally with a, an established place of worship. And I wonder, where does the board see their regulations for, say, THC cap percentage? How does the board see that impacting the use of cannabis for religious purposes? Say, for instance, in Exodus, there's a recipe for a holy anointing oil, and part of some faiths, as well as archaeological evidence, have shown that cannabis is an ingredient in the holy anointing oil of Moses from Exodus. Now, there are certainly going to be churches. The Rastafarian example is much more clearly defined as, just that they're going to, smoking cannabis is part of their religion. But the manufacture of the holy anointing oil containing cannabis, there's no concern for what the THC percentage of that holy anointing oil is when used for religious, healing, ritual, whatever. It's not relevant. It's not relevant whether it's 10% or 20%. It's not part of the consideration. The consideration is not to maximize one's intoxication, or I'm sorry, that's the incorrect word, considering that cannabis is not an intoxicant. It's not to maximize one's high or inebriation, if you want to go that far. It's to participate in a, multi-millennium old tradition. So I just wonder, I guess my question for the board is, where do they see those types of entities falling? Does this board consider that these regulations that are intended specifically for-profit entities, corporate entities, do they intend for these regulations to also apply to the use of cannabis for religious purposes? And like I said, cannabis is legal. A Rastafarian church should be legal, a temple,
Mr. Umansky, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. So, it's going to be something that this commission is going to have to decide, because I can guarantee that there are going to be congregations of different faiths exerting their religious rights to use cannabis, and I'm one of them, and I certainly wouldn't want to run afoul of the law. But at the same time, religious freedoms are fundamental First Amendment rights. So there's going to have to be some kind of, I don't want to say strike a balance, but the decision will have to be made as to where these regulations fall and if they are intended to apply to the use of cannabis for religious use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mansky. I'll note that the commission does not have an official position on these questions, because we do not have regulation rules issued just yet. Those rules, once adopted, will be the official position of the commission on these matters, but your comments are taken under advisement as we develop these rules.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Mr. Umansky? Thank you again for your time and your remarks this evening.
I'm going to try last time to allow Jessie Marie Villers to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving me another opportunity. I borrowed my fiance's work computer to get the updated Zoom, so I appreciate you coming back. So I'm Jessie Marie Villers. I've been a New Jersey medical marijuana patient for 7 years now. I'm someone who lives with chronic pain and debilitating chronic illness, CIDP, and I'm someone who's used cannabis to overcome opioid addiction. And I'm proud to say I've been opioid free for 8 years now. I started baking cannabis edibles seriously when I needed a series of 4 surgeries just a year after overcoming opioid addiction. My doctors told me I would not recover well without opioids, and had I taken their recommendation, I might not be alive today. Instead of opioids for surgery recovery, I baked myself strong dose cannabis edibles using my medical marijuana prescription. and I was able to recover from that surgery and stay opioid free. My experiences inspired me to share my cannabis baking knowledge. For the last few years, I've used my business, Baked by the River, to teach fellow cannabis patients how to bake edibles with their cannabis prescription, and I'm now an aspiring cannabis by micro business applicant. A lack of edible cannabis options has long been a problem for the New Jersey medical marijuana program. Many patients cannot smoke or vape or don't want to because of the damage it can cause your respiratory system. I personally had asthma growing up, and I've got acid reflux that's triggered by smoking. So for medicinal reasons, it's very important for me to have access to edibles. Edibles are one of the healthiest ways to consume cannabis, and they can provide long-lasting relief for patients. When teaching my cannabis baking course, I try and show patients ways to incorporate cannabis as part of their daily snacks and meals. Dispensaries should definitely carry cannabis-infused, potency-tested coconut oil, MCT oil, and clarified butter so that patients can bake and use the infusions as they see fit. Dispensaries also should be carrying cannabis-infused honey and cannabis-infused sugar so patients can easily take their prescription with a cup of tea or coffee. And of course, we also need potency-tested, packaged, labeled, pre-made baked goods, snacks, candies, made more available to consumers. There are a huge variety of different edibles bakers out there from different cultural backgrounds with different culinary experiences. I think the language around edibles should be flexible enough to include a variety of different products from chefs and bakers from different backgrounds, but with very rigid standards for potency testing, dosing, labeling, and sales. All cannabis options are available to cannabis patients should also be available to recreational users. Edibles are healthier than smoking, and you don't need to be a registered medical patient to want to take care of your respiratory health. From a public health standpoint, it makes sense to encourage cannabis users to seek out healthier alternatives to smoking and vaping. If smoking and vaping products are available to recreational users, it makes no sense not to make cannabis edibles available as well. As with all other intoxicating substances, cannabis edibles need to be sold, stored, and consumed responsibly. Businesses selling edibles need to be able to recommend proper dosage and types of edibles for different consumer needs, and businesses have a responsibility to educate consumers on what to expect when consuming a cannabis edible. I've been educating consumers for years on how to safely and responsibly consume edibles. It does not need to be something that is intimidating or stigmatized. When consumed responsibly, you can avoid any negative experiences. If sold and consumed responsibly, edibles should not have any negative impact on public health or safety.
Ms. Fillers, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. With proper safety guidelines and businesses that can educate consumers, we can include a variety of potency options for patients with different needs. As a plant medicine, cannabis has a huge effective dose range. Some people might only need a 1 milligram THC edibles, where others might need 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, or more. There are many factors that might cause certain patients to need higher edibles, including suppressed liver function, metabolic rate, tolerance level, or the endocannabinoid system. As someone who used cannabis to overcome opioid addiction and used cannabis edibles to stay off of opioids, I know from personal experience that some patients require high-dose edibles when trying to replace opioids as their main pain relief. The vast majority of consumers don't need that higher dose, but we need to make it available and accessible for patients that do. In conclusion, edibles are one of the safest and healthiest ways to consume cannabis, and so consumers should have greater access to a variety of different edible options. And we should allow edibles to be available as a healthy alternative to smoking and vaping wherever cannabis is being sold. With proper packaging, safety guidelines, and responsible businesses that can educate consumers, we can avoid any potential harm and actually benefit public health. So thank you very much for your consideration. I appreciate you coming back to me.
Very much, Ms. Fillers. Thank you for sharing your story, and congratulations to you on your personal journey.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you again for your time and your remarks this evening.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Blake, do we have any other speakers?
That is the end of our speaker list for this afternoon. Thanks to everyone who spoke and for everybody else's patience. Thank you.
No.
Madam Chair, can I just note something that's going to change for the next meeting as far as signing up for public comments?
You may, yes, Director Brown.
So just wanted to give a heads up to folks, we do require you to sign up in advance. There's now a form on the website, nj.gov/cannabis, which you can use. In the past, we've used this email MMP questions at doh.nj.gov. That's going to be transitioned between now and the next meeting to a CRC dedicated email account. So just please check the check the website leading up to that meeting so that you can be sure you're submitting written comments and other requests to the proper email address. Nonetheless, anything that goes to that old email address will still be forwarded to the CRC as we wind that down. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brown. Before we move to adjourn, I'd like to provide an opportunity for the commissioners to share any of their closing thoughts or remarks on the overall comments that we've heard this afternoon.
Madam Chairwoman, I thought it was very important today to hear from the municipalities, especially the president of the League of Municipalities, Mayor Janice Kanoff. I thought she made some very good points that I took notes on. And I think it's going to be important that we listen more and partner with the league and municipalities to move forward.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Chairwoman Waynu, I have a quick comment. I just want to thank the participants for taking the time out of their day to join us and share their comments on today's topics. Your comments matter to us. So the commission members reside in various parts of the state. Some are in the north, some are in central, and myself, I'm in the south. I mention this because we too live in the communities of New Jersey that will be impacted by the growing cannabis industry. There's a lot of excitement as to what this industry is going to bring, such as diversity in ownership opportunities, new jobs, and revenue reinvestment. And there's also concerns about the impact it will have on children. I heard safety issues and quality of life. We have to reframe this lingering stigma of 80 years, this fear-based messaging. Those messages that we've heard with the war on drugs were scary, and there was little credible evidence to support that. Erasing a stigma that has been perpetuated for many years is extremely difficult, but it's not impossible. And it begins with conversations. And navigating these conversations can be very difficult, yet they're essential. Cannabis has been around for thousands of years. It's been used for a means for health and wellness, and we recognize that. Our intentions are to develop safe and equitable regulations guided by legislation and input from members of the community like you. So again, I thank you for your participation. It's very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. I believe Commissioner Barker, you wanted to say something?
Very briefly, just in the spirit of Commissioner Delgado and Commissioner Nash's statements, I want to thank the participants. I want to thank the general public. I think today's meeting covered a host of different topics, but from the medical experts to the municipal leaders, I think the input was very helpful and informative. I'd be remiss not to mention today is the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa massacre of Black Wall Street. And as we consider, I think a few speakers, especially the ACLU, highlighted the charge for municipalities and the role that they play in reshaping and rebuilding communities. I just think in that same vein of, Tulsa being burnt to the ground and us still trying to rebuild it, the war on drugs and the war on people really devastated and crippled a lot of our communities and a lot of our New Jersey municipalities. And so, thankful to hear that the public is interested in rebuilding those same communities. It's helpful for us and looking forward to seeing maybe a few Black Wall Streets here in New Jersey in the coming years and decades based off, this industry.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker. Any other remarks?
On that same token, thank you, Madam Chair. On that same token, I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. Thank you to all the speakers this afternoon for sharing your thoughts and your expertise with the CRC. Like Commissioner Nash mentioned, we are community members. I personally live in Central Jersey. If we agree that we have a Central Jersey, and we're part of the communities that are asking these questions, and more education is needed, and we realize that. So we thank you for the comments that were made today. Mayor Kovac from the League of Municipality brought some good points to the CRC. Not every county or municipality are the same, and we acknowledge that. So when it comes to creating policies, we have to be very careful about any unintended consequences. So talking to all of you today was very helpful. It allows us to see where the gaps are and how we can address those gaps, either to close those gaps or address them at some point as we get ready to write the regulations. And a lot of you, as you know, equity and safety are the two core principles of the CRC, and your comments today were reflective of that. So thank you so much for your feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Del Cid. And I will offer last remarks very, very briefly, because I won't reiterate what 4 other people have said, but rather I'll just say ditto. And I'm looking forward very much to continuing working with members of the public and these key stakeholders as we move forward. Before we adjourn, that concludes the business for today. I'll say that. It's been a long day. Lots of testimony, heard lots of great things. Apologies for the technical issues that we had earlier today, but I'm glad we got them rectified and back on, got the train back on the tracks, and we're able to get a good number of folks back in the conversation. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Del Cid, you are on mute.
So moved, sorry.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Great, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the ayes have it. We are now adjourned. Now, our next regular meeting is scheduled for July 13th. While that is a month and a half away, I want the public to know that you can still make your voice heard with the commission by sharing any comments with us via our website or by email. And as Director Brown noted a little while ago, we now have a form on our website that can be used to submit comments directly, and any emails that you submit to the MMP questions at doh.nj.gov account will be automatically forwarded to the CRC as we finish the transition to this new agency. So thank you all for your time and your attention and for sticking out with us on a nearly 6-hour meeting. It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.